Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 regular business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with council members Cooper and partially excused this evening. And with that, I need a motion to approve this evening's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have an agenda. All right, so we have next up for a special recognition on our agenda, which is a shared reading of a proclamation recognizing Transgender Day of Visibility, beginning with Councilmember Madrone.
Whereas Transgender Day of Visibility was founded in 2009 by transgender activist Rachel Crandall, the executive director of Transgender Michigan, to acknowledge and honor the successes achieved by transgender people. And whereas the City of Olympia celebrates the significant contributions of transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people make to Olympia and affirms that they are vital members of our community. And
Whereas Transgender Day of Visibility provides a forum for transgender communities and allies to raise awareness of the need for visible support and resources for transgender, non-binary, and gender nonconforming people, and the awareness of persistent non-transphobic prejudice that permeates our society. And
whereas transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary community members are business owners, artists, educators, advocates, activists, family members, and friends who deserve to live free from discrimination and harassment of any form. And
whereas the City of Olympia honors the transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people of Olympia for their resilience and activism within our community, and acknowledges that work still needs to be done to address anti-transgender violence, particularly at this time when transgender rights and existence is being challenged. And whereas the City of Olympia recognizes that our transgender and gender diverse community members deserve a safe space to not just survive, but to live and to thrive. And
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Olympia City Council does hereby proclaim March 31st, 2024 as Transgender Day of Visibility and urges all its residents to respect and honor the right of our transgender and gender diverse community members to live openly in an authentic and accurate representation of who they are, free from violence, harassment, and discrimination. Signed in the city of Olympia, Washington, this 19th day of March 2024, Olympia City Council, Dante Payne, Mayor. And now I'd like to invite up Valerie Dettenwanger, Andrew Chavez, and Annie Monahan from Oli Trans Fam to say a few words and receive the proclamation.
Thank you, Council. Is it actually on, or am I just projecting? Okay. My name is Annie Monahan. I'm a trans femme who has lived in Olympia for the past year and a half, and I came here to this wonderful town as a refugee from eastern Utah. I'm honored to be given this chance to speak today. When I was asked to come up with a speech for today, I will freely admit that I struggled. What do I talk about? What do I use this time to highlight? Do I try to explain what is happening to us? Do I talk about the flood of anti-trans legislation that grows every day that we have to push back against? Do I talk about the increasing antagonism against our communities by right-wing groups and politicians? Do I tell yet another tale of struggles and trials and tribulations to try to humanize myself and the millions like me? Do I break down and cry over the loss of those who came before and those who are still losing today? Do I scream a cry of vengeance and rage for the youth whose futures have been robbed, like Next Benedict, a non-binary teen murdered by the hateful actions of Oklahoma politicians and the very laws that we must fight? Why this is so important. The laws that fuel the nagging voices in the back of our heads that our future is not guaranteed and must be kept fighting for a future of acceptance and peace. It is difficult to speak of visibility without confronting and acknowledging the fact that at this moment, our visibility is a liability. It is a risk to be seen as other. I'm very fortunate to live here in Olympia. This is a place that I am proud to call my home. Here I have found a community of people like me, of artists and creatives, and safe spaces for me to be myself. Steps like this recognition and acts like hanging of the trans flag and progress flags during Pride and the crosswalks on 5th and Washington are crucial. Olympia, Washington, and the Washington state at large should be proud that this is one of the safest spots to be gender nonconforming. But let us not grow complacent in that peace. Let us instead use this safety and success to push back against the hate and help us lift up our siblings in this struggle. Trans rights and protections are but one of many intersectional rights that we must protect and bolster. We must keep pressing onward. We are all in this fight together. Thank you for your time.
Hey y'all, my name's Valerie, she, it, and I'm here to talk about pride today, pride in our community. Visibility is about pride for us. And there's a lot for us to be proud of. We've got artists in the community. My one good friend that I live with has some artwork up at Torchlight Records right now, which is amazing. You should all check it out. My beautiful partner and I manage a combat sports group here in town where we do Viking fighting with queer people. We also have a lot of people working on housing. We have the Only Trans family organizing different events. We've organized a cleanup of Squaxin Park. And we are a proud people. We are a proud yet vulnerable people. And you all are going to be seeing an influx of us because Olympia is a great place to live for us. It's not perfect. I've experienced transphobia here myself. However, it's a lot better than a lot of situations that people have out in other states where there are pretty intense laws targeting people like me right now. And some things to consider as we have this influx coming in is, and some things that we can be helped with are housing, jobs, and another thing that would be very practicable would be inter-community dialogue with people like us. So we have a voice in the community and we can network and partner with other people in the community. Thank you very much.
My name is Andrea Chavez, she, her pronouns. I guess I'm just speaking from the heart a little bit today. So a lot of trans and queer people, when they come out, they have an aha moment. They figure themselves out. And for me, I don't really feel like I had that moment because I figured it out at a very, very young age. I was only 7 years old, and I was very local. I was actually just down over in Olympia, or Shelton. But the only words I had to describe transgender were derogatory terms from my church and my community. And I learned to hide myself very, very early. I learned to hide myself because I was beat for wearing a skirt while playing house, not even being trans or acting trans, just playing house. And it's situations like that that put me in the closet until my 30s, made me hide who I was for the betterment of my protection and my health. All these laws and legislations that are going through are very visible, and everything that we do is through legislation is more visible than it ever has been. Our children see it while they're on computers doing stuff. They hear about it. All of the young ones that are just trying to exist want to be protected, want to be themselves. All these laws, all they do is make them afraid to come out of the closet and hide themselves the way I did. When I came out, I didn't come out because I wanted to. I came out because I needed to. I got to a place where I was staring into the abyss, ready to step off. And while I was standing there, I had the realization that I can either step off and lose everything, or I could come out and take the one thing I actually ever wanted. So I did it. I'm lucky enough I had that realization that day because I'm lucky to be here today. Be myself. And it's the best choice I ever made to be myself. I'm happy every day. I don't hide. I don't pretend. I'm myself. It's so important that these laws that are being pushed all over the country are pushed down because they're hurting not just the queers that are out, not just the trans people, not just us. It's hurting the children that are in the closet that don't know yet, that figure out that they need to hide who they are or not be who they truly are because of all this fear. And it's not okay. So I urge everybody here today, when you go to vote or say, just think, is it going to hurt somebody to vote for this? And will it help somebody to vote against it and make the right choice? Thank you.
Okay, we'll be down in a moment to provide you with the proclamation and to take a photo with you, but first, any comments from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
Thank you so much for being here. I think each one of you taking the time to speak gave us a little something different and a little different way of looking at what this day can mean and how, and a bit of a call to action in each one I heard. I just so appreciate you showing up. You don't have to. And sharing gratitude, but then also like a bit about that was the first speaker. You had said, should I, like, how should I do this speech, right? Should I try to convince? There was a part of it where you're like, should I try to convince people how human I am? When you're busy just being a human and feeling all the things that humans feel and what we go through. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing a bit of yourselves so that other folks can learn. And I know that that's a taxing thing. I don't know it the way you do, but I know it's taxing. I think for me, and I think just looking at the faces around the room, hopefully you can see it was time well spent. And I think folks really heard you. I know I did. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Any other comments? Well, I just want to thank you all for being here. I think it's, sort of fitting that you chose to come out and accept this proclamation this evening to recognize this day of visibility. I believe our first speaker said that to be visible is a liability, and I guess I had never really thought about it in that way. That's a very succinct way of describing this kind of experience. But there is one thing that I want to say, that those of us who are in the LGBTQ community, we may be following certain news, even those that are allies or those that are not part of the community. And there's something that I want to say specifically in recognition of this day of visibility. And that is that there is no LGB without the T. I see a lot of this rhetoric or this idea of separating lesbians, gays, and bisexuals from transgender people because we see what is happening around the country, and we try to draw a line in between us. There is no us without you. We know what it's like to be othered. We know what it's like to be demonized, and just for whatever it's worth, just know that personally and from this seat, that I have your back, that I will defend your rights, that I will defend our rights, and for what it's worth, you have a city government and a state government, at least for now, that will also protect your rights. So thank you so much for being here to represent the community, and I'm happy to present you with the proclamation and to take a photo. right, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is under our special recognition, which is the Switches On campaign, which will be presented to us by Dr. Pamela Braff, our Director of Climate Programs, who is making her way to the podium.
Good evening, Council. For the record, Pamela Braff, Director of Climate Programs. And this evening I have just a quick presentation and update for you on our Switches On campaign, which we're really very excited to be launching now and to share with everyone, both as resources and information. So what is the Switches On campaign? It's really meant to be this one-stop shop, consumer education, outreach, information, inspirational campaign, all about building decarbonization. So when we talk about the Switches On, we're talking about switching from fossil fuels to all-electric renewable energy to power and heat our homes and our buildings and all of the spaces that we go to in the community. And we know that consumer education and outreach is really quite important. There's a lot of information out there about building electrification and building decarbonization. There's a growing number of incentives available, funding for folks to access it, but it's really, really difficult to navigate. We know even for folks who are ready and interested and excited and early adopters and ready to go, they still have trouble figuring out what should I do, where do I start, how do I find all of the information. And so this campaign that we're kicking off is really meant to help address a lot of those challenges. We know that the home electrification journey is a long one. Starting with awareness. You got to know that it's a step that you need to take and that you want to take. Think through all of your options. What do I want to electrify in my home? Do I want to go solar first? Do I want to replace a window? Do I want to get a heat pump? There's so many questions, so many decisions that folks need to make along the way. And then we all know who's our most trusted messenger. It's our friends, it's our family, it's our community, so helping to share that information with each other. So the Switches On campaign, it's really this broader regional approach. It's not just the City of Olympia, it's the City of Olympia working in partnership with several other partners and jurisdictions, including King County, Pierce County, Thurston County, Seattle, and Tacoma, as well as several nonprofit partners working together to bring this campaign forward. And we're also working with industry partners and industry champions, so chefs and manufacturers and retailers and all the folks who are coming together to make our electrification journey a real one. And it pulls together a lot of different things. We have a website that we've actually launched and folks can access now, where you can find all sorts of information. That website is going to include an incentive finder, a contractor finder. You can just type in your zip code and get whatever information you need. So making that super easy and accessible for folks. And it really the campaign is focusing on these several different elements. Education, making sure that the information is available and accessible for folks that need it, including in multiple languages. We're working on translation now too, which will soon be available on the website. Inspiring people to make the switch, to take a change, see all of the amazing and cool things that happen when you do things like switch to induction cooking, electric heat pumps, which also provide cooling, all of these great benefits, and then finally providing the resources needed to help guide folks towards that decision. And we're really hoping that with this work, we really kind of reach beyond early adopters, and we tap into and we work with all of the great other work that's happening right now to really shift us into a market transformation rather than these kind of one-time projects. So just a little bit more about what is included in each of these steps. So the first piece is education, and so the foundation of that is our website, The Switches On, and so you can find this if you go to wa.switcheson.org. You can find all sorts of information and resources there. And I just want to flag that it's continuing to grow. Over time, we'll be continuing to update it and add more tools and resources over the next few months, but this is really meant to be your one-stop shop if you want to know why electrification is important, how it helps my health, how it helps my home, how it helps my community, how it helps our planet, all of these things. You can find this information on the Switches On. So that's really a great place to start if you're just trying to get some more information about what's going on. The second piece of this is inspiring folks, and one of the key elements of this is working with trusted messengers. So this is an example of some trusted messengers from a similar campaign that ran in California that we'll be working over the next several months to create similar trusted messengers in our community to help kind of carry the word about the work and the importance of electrification and how to do it. And a really big piece of that is also working with chefs who can show really kind of connect with people over food and cooking and really focusing on the benefits of induction cooktop. Really cool, very fast, you can't burn yourself. Like all of these really great things that are available. And then also just having a community presence. So we're working with several other local governments. We're working with nonprofits and community partners, and we're going to be showing up over the next several months at community events and just helping to talk about the Switches On and the campaign and what it means. And then finally, for folks that are ready now or might be ready in the future to make the switch, we're here to, through this resource, help folks with that as well. And that is really based on our localized campaign website, which is providing information about contractors and incentives. And so what's really cool about this, and here's an example from the California program site, is you can go into this website, you can put in your zip code, and it'll pull up for you all of the state and federal and local incentives and state and federal and local contractors that are available to help you with whatever electrification or renewable energy project you're interested in. You can filter by incentives for single-family households, multifamily households, for renters, for solar, for heat pumps, kind of whatever you're interested in to help find it. And this, again, will continue to be added to over time as we get more and more contractors into the network and as more and more incentives are added. So right now, the incentive finder just has some federal and utility incentives in it, but we'll be populating that out with more local incentives. Things like our Energize Heat Pump campaign, Olympia's program, will be listed in here too when we get ready to launch that again this year. So this will be the place to go for all of this information. And then I just want to flag that we're also doing a little bit of work to measure success. Is it working? How are people learning? How do people kind of know about electrification? And so one of the things that we're really focusing on is market transformation. So we're not tracking sales, we're tracking awareness. And so we did a pre-campaign survey of folks in the Thurston County area, King County, Tacoma, just to kind of get a sense of, do you know what this means? How do you think about it? Are you interested in electrification, that type of thing? And then we'll be running a similar campaign, a similar survey again in several months to see if kind of, is this outreach and messaging working? Are more folks aware? Are perceptions changing? That type of thing. So we're really excited to be launching this. We've been working on it, well, really not that long, for just a couple of months, and we're really building off of the partnerships that we have in place. That's allowing us to bring this forward much faster than we would have been able to do if we were bringing it forward by ourselves. And so I just want to put the website up here one more time. It's wa.switcheson.org. If you go there, you'll find lots of information and resources. And if you see anything that's not working right, let me know. We're continuing to work to kind of work out any last bugs that are in there, and we'll be adding more resources over the next several months. And thank you.
Yeah, definitely worth an applause. Thank you, Dr. Braff. Any questions or comments from council? Well, you answered the one question that I have, which was going to be about how do we know that the campaign is working, and you answered that, so thank you. And I did learn one new word from that presentation, chef-fluencer. I'd never heard it before.
It's the next influencer.
Thank you, Dr. Braff.
Thank you.
All right. So that concludes special recognition, and we will move on to public comment. So it looks like we have a number of folks signed up for public comment this evening in chambers. And I do want to remind everyone that you have about 2 minutes to deliver your remarks. There is a clock to my right, your left, with a 2-minute timer. The red light indicates, the green light indicates that your time has begun. The yellow light means that you have about 30 seconds remaining in your comments, and the red light indicates that your time is up for your comments. I do want to just remind everybody that we have some contentious issues that we'll be discussing this evening in public comment and for the public hearing later this evening. So I will ask you to please keep your comments respectful as we deliberate on these issues together as a community. So with that, I will turn it over to the Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, so just checking in, Kelly, is that we have all public comment is in person. Is that correct? Okay. So with that, I'll go ahead and just, we have quite a few names here, so I'll call a couple of people at a time just so that you know that you're in queue to be up next. So first we have Talana Reed, followed by, I think it's maybe Catalia Osterich. Oh, Cynthia. Thank you.
I apologize, I don't have a very loud voice today, but thank you, Council, for hearing this. I work for the Tenants Union of Washington State. I am a former chair of the Thurston County Affordable Advisory Board, and I just work in tenant protections countywide and statewide. I want to say thank you for considering these measures. It is so important that tenants have protections. I work with tenants statewide, have the data to back it up, to show that landlords are being predatory. They are displacing families. Over 40,000 students are homeless in the state. It's not the students' fault. It's because of unchecked rent prices and no regulatory measures to keep families housed. And we need these protections that are on the table. Landlords are going to be here today to tell you that it's going to impact them gravely. They own these homes. And the renters don't have an opportunity to save up to buy a home because they're paying such enormous amounts in rents. I really urge you all to, as you make these decisions, to have folks at the table that work in tenant protections, that work, attorneys, have all the stakeholders at the table. I work with the city of Tacoma on their last set of tenant protections. Worked very closely with them. They had stakeholders at the table, and they passed renter protections. They are crucial. We want to, homelessness and affordable housing are two trains going down the track at a very high speed, and both are destroying lives. And I just urge you all to consider these measures and don't back down from your duty to make sure that we all have safe and affordable housing and that we can thrive in this community. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next public commenter, City Manager Bernie.
Well, I'm just going to make a comment that there may be folks signed up for public comment that really intended for their comments to be under the public hearing. And so this is the time to talk about other items that are on the council's agenda, not necessarily the renter protection ordinances. There'll be a separate sign-up sheet, a separate comment period for those wishing to sign up there. And if you didn't get signed up on that sheet and got signed up on this sheet instead, we could perhaps juggle your names around there.
Something. Possibly. Sorry, just one moment, Cynthia. Could we, because there are a couple of people signed up here, could we roll through the public comment and then we'll sort it out on our end?
That's totally under your purview. The reason I mentioned it is because the public hearing allows for 3 minutes versus 2 minutes under general public comment. So I just want to make sure everyone knew that.
All right, so I'll go ahead and just look at the topic area and then I'll just ask if that's all right. Okay. Thanks for rolling with us, folks. Cynthia, thanks for the time. Go ahead.
Thank you. I apologize. I've never spoken in anything for government before. This is the first time I've ever speaking. So I have prepared my little commentary. We've lived in the same apartment since we moved here in 2016, and in that time that we've lived here, our rent has increased nearly 70%. Each increase is no less than 10%, and we were very thankful when the rent memorandum was put up as it prevented those increases from occurring. In 2022, they delivered a $1,645 renewal, though due to the outrage, they compromised at $1,475. But we were not allowed to sign anything more than a 6-month lease so that they could turn around in the 6 months and then make up again the difference that we would have paid. It is in my opinion that all of these steps are done purposefully so that when our lease was up for renewal and the memorandum expired, they could recoup those losses. I also want to raise concerns that these properties have created new fees, and as a personal example is for parking spaces. What is distressing is to see that these fees are also increased, and it feels as though it's done in an effort to circumvent the rent increase thresholds that require longer renewal notices. I also want to address the protections proposed for air conditioning. In 2021, the week before the deadly heat wave, we were notified by our management company that everyone was required to remove a window unit AC as a violation of the leasing agreement. We had the maintenance inspect the unit after it was installed with a stabilizing bracket in 2019. I have copies of those communications if anybody would like them. Ultimately, we were permitted the use of our existing unit for the Fair Housing Act as a reasonable accommodation. Our dwelling has only 3 windows, only one of which that opens vertically and 2 that open side to side. The property management's compromise has been the use of interior window AC units that are more costly, and that realistically, they're nowhere near as effective as a window model, and they have to be added to each different room in the apartment.
Thank you very much. Your time has expired, but I do just want to recognize what the city manager just said about the public hearing later this evening. You have 3 minutes, and so typically there's standard practice that we open it up to anyone who's in the chambers to speak who has not signed up for the public hearing. So if you have more to say, feel free to say it at that point, or you can email us your comments as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so next we have Grant Cohen, followed by Izzy Baldo, and I am seeing that Izzy is preparing to speak also about renters' rights, and so I guess at your time, Izzy, you can let me know if you'd like to hold for the public comment so you can have an additional minute, or if you'd like to go ahead with public comment. All right, so we'll welcome Grant Cohen up.
Hello, with all due respect, I want to welcome in the socialist revolution that's peaceful, that's coming into Olympia. And I also want to thank everybody for coming to this protest today, and I want to say that I'm happy to see empowered women. And I want to say that I don't think rent control is enough. I think rent control needs to be abolished because housing is a human right. And I want to say that if you live in Olympia, Washington, and you don't have a GED, you're basically treated like a black person in the 20s, and I can tell you that from experience. And I also want to say that a minimum wage in Olympia, Washington is not high enough. We need a livable wage. And I also want to say that we need to be scared of the fascism that's coming because you know, the people in the past were never really scared of it before until it hit them. And there's a lot of people who foolishly think that just because they march behind Trump, they won't be persecuted. But they will. It doesn't matter whether you're conservative, it doesn't matter whether you're Republican, they're after you all, the right-wing extremists, the neo-Nazis. And I can also say that we need to address all these issues. Class warfare is definitely going to be coming. It won't come in violence, but it will come in protests to the masses. Wall Street is crumbling. Thank you.
All right, so next we have Izzy. Is Izzy in the audience? And would you like to speak now or hold for later?
Yes, I'm fine. I think with 2 minutes is fine.
Oh, lovely. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my name is Izzy Baldo. I've been a registered nurse in the community for 21 years now, proud to serve this community. I want to talk to you about one of the main social determinants of health, which is secure and affordable housing, which is why I'm a firm believer in what we have laid out in the initiative for Olympia for All. I want you to strongly see that correlation. In the last 6 to 18 months, it's been a deluge of patients that are coming to us. We're seeing them for their chronic conditions or acute conditions, but we are seeing a very direct link with their housing instability, the stress it's putting on people. And it is very disheartening to be talking to somebody in their 60s, 70s, and even 80s who on their own, with very short notice, are needing to leave their housing and they have no idea what to do. We're putting more and more time into dealing with that particular social determinant, housing, making sure that people just have a roof over their head. There's a lot of couch surfing going on. There's a lot of sleeping in cars going on. And and people saying, well, I don't know how much longer I'll have my insurance, so I'm not sure how much longer I'll be able to even access my health care. In the meantime, we're trying to put things together very quickly. I'm seeing more and more of the doctors and PAs that I work with just coming out of office visits very disheartened because they can diagnose and they can treat, they can come up with a treatment plan, but they cannot, at that level, affect housing. So please just keep in mind that if we can create more housing stability in this community, we will see our healthcare in general improve. Thank you very much.
All right, so next I'm seeing Alex Mershow and followed by Colette Paulson. I believe Alex is walking up to the podium.
Hello. You can hear me, right? Okay, yeah. So I don't really have an idea of all of the things that are in the purview of the topics for tonight. I just kind of wanted to turn you guys on to maybe some ideas possibly that maybe haven't been explored yet. As far as in our area, I know that part of what was being discussed as far as like alternatives for housing models here was that one of the things was that we were looking at building up as far as like apartments on top of like the buildings that we have here. But there, if I remember correctly, that was kind of shot down because the infrastructure wasn't able to support it. So I don't know if we're exploring the option of public banking in order to try to accommodate that infrastructure cost. I know that Washington has a Senate bill, 5188, I think is what it is, that we have already sort of like walked down this avenue, but the basically the shorthand version of it was the privatized banking kind of did what they do and pushed it out of the purview of the public. So I don't know if there's anything that we would be able to do in the municipal to try to create something here to help with that problem. But anyway, that's really all I wanted to bring up tonight. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Just want to take a moment to recognize that we might have some folks that this might be their first time public commenting, and so once we roll through all of the public comments, there will be an opportunity for council to comment at the end. So we're listening, and if you're hoping to hear a response, you might hear one. All right, so next we have Colette Paulson, followed by Jonah Vandick.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Colette Paulson. I am a resident of the east side of Olympia. I am not here tonight for the same reason everyone else is, so I'm sorry for taking time. But you very well might be thinking to yourself, I kind of look a little familiar. I was just here a couple weeks ago to talk about the possible school closures that the Olympia School Board is contemplating. And I understand this issue doesn't fall under your jurisdiction and that you don't want anyone telling you how to do your job. It's clear. I totally agree with that too. But I'd still like to take a little bit of time to share a little bit more of what's been happening. My name doesn't carry 3 letters behind it, but rather my name is just 3 letters, Mom. And one of the roles I take very seriously is protecting my children from harm. And while from the outside looking in, for some people, the possibility of a school closure might not seem like harm, I respectfully disagree. Many families in this community, including my own right now, are hurting. There's a lot of anxiety and what ifs. There's tears and anger, frustration and fear. Communications from the Olympia School District have been lacking for several months about this whole process, and there has been little to no transparency. So many in this community are left wondering what's going on and what's going to happen next. Schools are the very foundation of their neighborhoods and a gathering place for community. I'm fortunate that I'm able to be here tonight and speak with you because I have the means to transport myself to City Hall and have a very surface level understanding of the process for signing up for public comment. But there are many who feel unheard and unseen. We respect the office of the mayor and the city council and understand there might not be anything you can do, but we would welcome any and all support. Just being able to share our message so that others will hear us has been a breath of fresh air during some very tense and difficult times. Thank you for this time this evening and for your service to our wonderful community.
All right. Jonah, looks like you're ready to public comment, and you're okay with the 2 minutes?
Sure.
Is that right? Okay, great. Go ahead.
So, I am a landlord. I've been a landlord for 40 years. My tenants don't hate me. And I hear about the increases in rents. This has not been the case for me or my husband. And, you know, I just want to encourage you to include all the stakeholders at the table when thinking about changes, because sometimes you can have the opposite impact that you're hoping to have with something. So the other thing I want to just encourage is not to vilify people. You know, I'd love for Olympia to be an area of kindness, respect for all people, respect for all voices, and, you know, not hate mongering. And so just, you know, just have all voices in the conversation, if you would. I also would like to see, you know, more information about, I mean, I came here hoping to learn more about what's being proposed. I saw a sheet with the tenants union about restrictions on increases and yada, yada, yada. I think those all seem very reasonable. So I just, you know, on the communication end of things, want to encourage open communication so that people can understand what's going on, and kindness and respect and how everyone is treated in the process. And in particular, I want to, oh my goodness, my time's up. Just say about mobile home communities over 55. That's a particular area of concern for, you know, huge rent increases for those guys. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to let folks know that if you would like to, you are absolutely welcome to stay. Right before the public hearing, there will be a presentation from staff on what exactly is being proposed. So, okay. So next we have Desiree Tolliver, followed by Ozzy Bustamante.
Hello. I will keep my comments to the socialism aspect. I was born in Svendborg, Denmark. I still have family in Denmark, and I am a democratic socialist as well as an abolitionist. I think the comment about being black in the 20s is very interesting, because have you been black in 2024? My daughter knows the difference of the N-word coming from a black person and a white person because of her hearing the difference of a black person and a white person saying the N-word here in Olympia, Washington. My daughter has only ever been in New Jersey outside of Olympia, Washington, and she heard it here. With that being said, socialism covers things like healthcare and other variations of inequality. I think Denmark does a great job at displaying socialism. My grandmother had both of her knees replaced before I could even get the actual MRI for a brain tumor that my doctors very greatly believed that I had based off my test results. That's because there are other systems in place besides what they portray to people to be out there to take care of others. My cousin Alexander, we don't really talk that much very often because he doesn't like to speak English and I don't like to speak Danish. He thinks his English is terrible, but I can't even say rot grot med fu, which is the word Danish people make every English person say because they can't say ugh. And I didn't even say it right. He lost his job, and he didn't find out that my daughter and I were unhoused until after he lost his job, and he sent money for me to buy stuff for my daughter, even though he lost his job, because the government ensures that he will be able to get education to get another job or find another job in his field. The government also ensures that his family can stay home with his children as they're being raised, as well as giving them supports for their children. There are so many things that are misrepresented, and realistically, I think Denmark's only downfall is the same pillars that uphold capitalism, racism, homophobia, sexism, ageism. Without those things, communities as a whole can flourish. That's it.
Thank you. Our final public commenter tonight, I believe, is coming up here now.
Hello. My name is Ozzy Bustamante. I work at the Evergreen State College in their housing office. And I just wanted to uplift and share that a lot of what we've heard from people tonight is absolutely true, and I see it every day. I have probably one student a month come into the office looking for emergency housing because they're currently, as a student and as a full-time worker, living in their car. As someone who works in a space where housing opens up and closes up all the time, it's difficult to see people that you can't help. There are not enough resources for people who are young, who are renting for the first time, and who make a very average amount of money. Even myself as an employee with the Evergreen State College who makes, like midway through my pay range, I cannot easily move out of the apartment I started living in 2018 because I don't make enough money to live even with one other roommate in Olympia, as housing is right now. So I just wanted to say, from the perspective of someone who deals with housing every day, who helps give resources to people who are looking for housing, who listens to phone calls from worried parents asking, hey, what is it like out there? Are there going to be places for my kid to go if they leave housing at Evergreen and they want to look for something else? Because the answer is no. They need a cosigner, they don't have enough renting history, they don't make enough money, and we are constantly taking students from living in their cars to living in housing and then back and forth because financial situations are not great. So I just wanted to lift that up, both as my professional and personal experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and with that, that concludes public comment for this evening. Any comments from the dais? Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I just real quick wanted to respond to Joan, something that you mentioned. Well, first, you mentioned that you saw a sheet from the campaign that had a demonstration in front of City Hall tonight, and there's the campaign in the community, and then there's what we're working on as the Olympia City Council, and so you'll see a presentation of that in not too long. But you also mentioned mobile home communities, and I wanted to let you know that the Regional Housing Council, which is a body of all the jurisdictions, this year we are tackling that issue to figure out what we can do, because you're right, those are folks who, like, when the land is sold beneath them, and then they really struggle, because when the rent on that land increases, they can't necessarily move the house, the part that they own, with them. And so I just want to let you know that we're taking a regional look at that. There are quite a few mobile home communities in Thurston County, and it is it's alarming how many of them are at risk of losing their housing. So work is being done on that.
Thank you, Councilmember Madrone. Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you very much, everybody who spoke. It's clear that the need is really, really great. And I also appreciate that you modeled what we hope will happen during the public hearing. Because if we can keep calmly listening to each person's ideas, we can actually get them into our brain, and that would be really helpful in our deliberations. And last, I want to speak to Ms. Paulson. I appreciate the repeated updates about the school district work. And it's true, I don't want to weigh in on how the school district fixes it, but I want to tell you that our neighborhood grade school is absolutely the center of our neighborhood and has been important to me for my whole adult life. So there you go.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilman. Any other comments from the dais? Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
We had a fair amount of public commenters coming in and talking about housing, and I think we'll continue hearing about that tonight. Just wanted to encourage folks that came, and it sort of, I'm not sure, but for some folks that came to the podium tonight for public comment, it seemed like maybe you were unsure if you had wanted to come or not, or maybe you don't do it all the time. And I just want to appreciate that you did come here this time, and I heard some kind of apology sometimes, or some uncertainty, and I know that myself, and when talking to colleagues, we so appreciate it when you come and you bring us something, even if it's totally out of the box. You know, we've had public commenters come and go, where'd that come from? You know, and it's turned into something really lovely, or at least it's informed something that maybe we're already working on, and gave us another perspective on it. I'll tell you, for example, there's Alex that spoke to the public banking piece of it. Recently, our email boxes just got flooded with things about public banking, and then I'm looking at our upcoming agendas. I'm like, are we deciding on public banking? You know, and so it's perked our ears up, and we're digging in to learn more about, you know, what could that look like, and what exactly would the municipality's role be in it, right? So. Anyways, thank you so much for coming tonight is really the highlights of it, and you can bring anything you want to public comment, and I think that's what's kind of really the beauty of it, and we got some of that tonight, so thanks, very rich.
Well said, thank you. All right, so with that, we will move on to adoption of the consent calendar. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the consent calendar signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Consent calendar is adopted. So that takes us to item 5A on our agenda, which is a public hearing on the relocation assistance and additional renter protections. And here to present to us this evening is Krista Lenson, the city's Senior Housing Program Specialist. Hi, Krista.
Good evening, Mayor Payne and council members. For the record, my name is Krista Lenson, and I'm a Senior Housing Program Specialist. I'll be providing an overview of the proposed amendments to the Olympia Municipal Code in preparation for tonight's public hearing. So today we're going to review draft code language amendments to Olympia's rental housing code. The public hearing will include all the proposed amendments, as well as provide an opportunity for the public to provide comments regarding tenant screening policies and practices. So at Council's August study session, staff presented information about relocation assistance for properties that are condemned, demolished, or need substantial rehabilitation. These policies are a complement to the city's rental housing inspection program, which will take effect next year. I want to note that for the second type of relocation assistance, which is authorized under state law, RCW 59.18.440, that a public hearing is required to implement this relocation assistance, which led to the scheduling of the public hearing this evening. Because we had other proposals discussed by land use, we decided to include all of these so that the public could make comment tonight and share information. So relocation assistance can help facilitate smoother tenant transitions into new housing situations when they're displaced from their current unit, which helps avoid potential evictions or homelessness. So the first section under RCW 59.18.085 is already required under state law. So this requires landlords to provide relocation assistance if the housing unit is condemned or deemed unlawful to occupy by a government entity. In the proposed code language, funds may be advanced by the city if the landlord fails to pay the tenant within 7 days of notice that their property is condemned. The city would then seek reimbursement from the landlord for that payment. The second section is more focused on redevelopment of housing units. So relocation assistance would be paid to low-income tenants, which in this case is defined as below 50% of area median income, who are displaced when a property is demolished, substantially rehabilitated, or the use changes. So change of use in this circumstance would be defined as a residential property that's being converted to a non-residential use, conversion from a long-term to a short-term or vacation rental, or could include condominium conversions. So the costs in this circumstance would be shared 50-50 by the city and the landlord. Under the state law, the city cannot require the landlord to pay more than half of those costs. The code language proposed does allow the landlord and the tenant to negotiate moving to another unit if that's an option. In the past 2 to 3 years, the cities of Bellingham, Tacoma, and Seattle have adopted requirements for landlords to pay relocation assistance to tenants who are forced to move because of a rent increase over a specified amount. The Land Use and Environment Committee reviewed options at their January meeting to align with our current Olympia code requirements and directed staff to prepare code language to establish these requirements if the statewide legislation regarding rent stabilization did not pass. So the state legislative session has ended and rent stabilization bills were not passed by legislators. Proposed code amendments would require the landlord to offer relocation assistance when they provide a tenant with a rent increase of over 5%. The tenant would then have 45 days to request relocation assistance from the landlord, and the landlord would have 31 days to pay the tenant that relocation assistance. The tenant may move out at any time after that point with 20 days written notice to their landlord. If the tenant does not move out before the rent increase takes effect, they would be required to repay that relocation assistance and pay the new rental amount. The amount of relocation assistance would be 2 times the monthly rent if the rent increase is over 5% but less than 10%, and 3 times the monthly rent if the increase is 10% or more. We've heard from tenants and tenant advocates about excessive fees, such as month-to-month fees or fees for mandatory services like a garbage valet service. I've included a tenant ledger that was provided by a local legal aid attorney as an example. There's been increasing national attention on this issue with memos and policy briefings from both HUD and the National Consumer Law Center. Many other cities in Washington have limited fees for late payment of rent. While tenant payments must first be applied toward rent, additional fees can add up on a tenant's ledger so that they're not able to catch up on the balance owed. Some of these fees are incurred not just once, but can accrue daily. These fees can later end up on a judgment that is reported to credit agencies and reflected on a tenant's rental history, which can impact their ability to access housing in the future. Staff has developed code language that defines and limits what types of fees can be charged by a landlord. Permissible fees include a late fee that is capped at $10 per month, fees for damages or actual costs that are incurred by a landlord, including damages to a unit, dishonored checks, or improvements that are requested by the tenant. It also allows for an application or a screening fee, and in state law it outlines that landlords can only charge the actual costs for providing that screening fee, as well as allowable deposits and pet deposits that are allowed under Olympia's current code. During our public engagement for renter protections and around climate vulnerability, staff heard from some tenants that their landlords prohibit them from installing cooling devices or AC units. With rising temperatures, the need for cooling devices is increasing, and it's a safety issue for tenants, particularly for seniors and people with disabilities. Staff has modified a sample policy from the state of Oregon. Oregon allows some parameters to be set by landlords, such as requiring the removal of the unit during winter months and requiring that an agent of the landlord install the unit. This would not require landlords to purchase or provide AC units, but would provide tenants the ability to install their own unit. So in Olympia, landlords are already required to provide tenants with a longer notice period to increase rent by more than 5%. This longer notice period was intended to allow tenants to begin searching for a new housing unit. The proposed code language includes an ability for tenants to break their lease without penalty after they receive that rent increase notice over 5%. This would allow tenants to move out if they find another housing situation without fear of owing additional fees to break their lease early or the remainder of rent for their lease term. Since the launch of our rental registry program, we've listened to feedback we've heard from community members, and we've heard several property owners are renting far below market rents to a member of their immediate family. Many purchased housing due to their family members' difficulty in locating housing that was affordable to them. These property owners have indicated that they don't own any other units, and they intend to sell that property if their family member ever moves out. So before you today, there's a proposed exemption from the rental registry licensing and inspection requirements for property owners who rent to their immediate family members. I've also drafted an affidavit that these property owners could fill out to request this exemption and agree to register the unit if they ever decide to rent to someone outside of their family. The affidavit also indicates that the property owner could lose the exemption if the city receives a complaint that the building conditions are uninhabitable or that there are violations of the city's rental housing code. So while there are no proposed amendments before council today, staff has included sample tenant screening policies adopted by other jurisdictions and invites public comment on this topic. Tenant screening often includes criminal history, credit history, eviction history, income to rent ratios, and requirements to provide a social security number. Many of the sample policies from other jurisdictions do not completely prohibit a landlord from screening an applicant's criminal, credit, or eviction histories, but rather they provide guidance as to what kinds of information may be included for consideration in that screening. Best practices include completing an individual assessment rather than relying on blanket policies that exclude applicants. Many policies allow the applicant to provide alternative information to help demonstrate their ability to pay rent, establish identity, and establish their employment history. Most of us know someone who has faced these kind of difficulties in accessing housing due to one of these screening barriers. Through community engagement in both the rental housing code updates and the assessment of fair housing, we've learned about the challenges that tenants with higher barriers and lower incomes face in accessing housing. It's well documented that there are disparities in our criminal justice system for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. HUD released guidance in 2016 that directs housing providers to not have overly restrictive criminal background policies, such as blanket no felony policies, because they have a discriminatory impact on people of color and violate the Fair Housing Act. Other jurisdictions have created policies that allow landlords to review a prospective tenant's criminal history and complete an individualized assessment that takes into account factors like the nature of the crime and how long ago it occurred. It's also well documented that people of color have had less access to credit to establish a positive credit history. On-time rent payments are not typically reported by landlords and would not be reflected in a tenant's credit score, and therefore may not provide an accurate assessment of a tenant's ability to pay rent. In Minneapolis, landlords cannot screen tenants based on credit score, but can consider information in a credit report if it's relevant to their ability to pay rent, and cannot screen out tenants if they have insufficient credit history. In Philadelphia, landlords cannot have a blanket exclusion policy based solely on the tenant's credit score or screening score. Eviction histories may also not accurately represent what occurred in a tenant's history without further context. In Washington State, once an eviction is filed, it frequently shows up on a tenant screening report, even if it was filed in error or if there was a resolution. In Philadelphia and Minneapolis, landlords are prohibited from considering evictions prior to a certain time frame, evictions that were dismissed or resolved, and several other specific circumstances. Minneapolis prohibits landlords from rejecting applicants based on insufficient rental history. Young adults might be unfairly rejected due to these kinds of policies. Many landlords require an applicant to make 3 or more times the rent, and some require each household member to demonstrate they earn 3 or more times the rent, rather than the combined income of the household. Many low-income and fixed-income individuals, such as seniors and people with disabilities, struggle to meet these requirements. Tacoma prohibits landlords from requiring an applicant's income to be more than 2.5 times the rent if the unit rent is above HUD fair market rents, or 3 times the rent if the rent is under HUD fair market rent. In Minneapolis, if a landlord requires an income equal to 3 times the rent or higher, the landlord must allow an exception where the applicant can demonstrate a history of successful rent payment with an income that is less than 3 times the rent. Washington state law against discrimination prohibits discrimination in housing based on a person's citizenship or immigration status. Other cities have implemented policies that require landlords to accept alternative forms of identification or eligibility besides a social security number. So staff has received public comment since March 5th, and we look forward to learning more through public comment on the proposed amendments, as well as their experiences with tenant screening practices and policies. We'll continue to process the public comments that have received and what we hear tonight. Staff will come back to present these amendments to council on April 9th. And I'd be glad to answer any additional questions before we move into the public hearing.
Thank you very much, Krista. Any questions or comments from council? Councilmember Madrone.
Yeah, I just wanted to start off as the chair of the Land Use and Environment Committee that has brought this package of policies forward. And I'll share some brief comments this evening, but I'll have more to say when we deliberate on the policies as a council on April 9th. So this is iterative work of the Olympia City Council, which has been largely taking place through the Land Use and Environment Committee. Our work on housing policies has been ongoing for many years. For rental housing policies, it even predates my time on council. That's how long the city's been working on it. And actually, when I first came onto council, I recall an in-person event to engage tenants and landlords on these issues not long before COVID shut everything down. And it definitely revealed a deep level of contention around rental housing policies in our community. And so what we have before us this evening is a package of rental housing policies that have been developed by the Land Use Committee, though some have been in front of council before at a previous study session where we were discussing the rental housing registry, and others have emerged after a review of other policies that passed in other communities since we started on this body of work. The purpose of this public hearing this evening is to hear from the community, and we've obviously got quite a few people here who would like to speak. And we've already been receiving numerous emails with a wide range of perspectives expressing the experiences of both tenants and landlords. I've seen hopeful comments that will take action to better protect tenants, as well as concerns from landlords on how these policies will impact them. And this evening I see friends on both sides of this equation here. And so I'm here to listen to all of your perspectives, and I'll be listening for the impacts that you're currently experiencing or that you fear you will experience as a result of these policies. But I'm really going to be listening closely for solutions. It's clear to me that the situation as it is currently untenable. And so if what we've proposed doesn't work for you, I want to hear solutions, and I think that's one thing that's really been lacking in a lot of the dialogue on these issues. I welcome other ideas that you would like us to consider. But before that, though, I know we'll have some time for council to ask questions so that we can make sure that we are all clear on what's been proposed. And so I'll just leave it at that and, talk more when we look at this again in April.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Madrone. Any other questions or comments from the dais? Councilmember Gilman.
Krista, I have one specific question. When we were talking about the fees, I realized I don't have an understanding of how damages to a unit beyond what would be covered by the damage deposit, I don't know how that value is decided, how it's assessed or collected. I saw it was listed, damages, but tell me how that works.
Yeah, and my understanding is that the damages could be charged to a tenant's ledger if they're, during the tenancy. Oftentimes it'll be after a tenant moves out. But if there are additional damages that are found during the tenancy, they could be charged.
So my question is, at the end of their time renting, and just to put it bluntly, if the unit is trashed, what's the recourse? Is that? I just don't know.
Typically.
Sure, that makes sense.
So typically, the landlord might withhold the deposit from the tenant that was paid up front. They can also pursue through something like small claims court. And as Talana mentioned, there's also a landlord mitigation fund program at the Department of Commerce that landlords can seek reimbursement for damages in certain situations.
Thank you, Krista. I appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments? I do have a question about this So it says here that the city will advance relocation assistance in the event that a unit is condemned and the landlord does not pay that relocation assistance to the tenant within 7 days. Where in the city's budget is that advance coming from?
Yeah, so some of the relocation assistance funds will be provided through our buildings upgrade prize funding that we received, and through rental registration fees, or if there's any fees collected through that program.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? So I'll just say we have quite a long list of folks that wish to speak this evening in the public hearing. So before I open it, I do once again just want to ask that you please be respectful, but also I'm also really excited about the fact that we have this much civic participation on an issue like this. I think it's very important, and for what it's worth, this is another mechanism for the council to hear a variety of perspectives from our community on this. This is not just a legal requirement, but it is something that we value as we consider whether or not to adopt these policies. So I thank you for your participation this evening. So with that, I am going to open the public hearing on relocation assistance. And we are going to start with all the folks that are here this evening in chambers, and then we will turn to those who are online. And you will have 3 minutes for your comments. Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, and again, we'll go ahead and just call a couple of names so you can be ready. First, we have Bob Jacobs, followed by Andrew Barkus, followed by Whitney Bowerman.
Good evening, I'm Bob Jacobs, and for the record, I live at 720 Governor Stevens Avenue in Olympia. The City of Olympia has done an exemplary job in providing housing for those most in need. I was pleased to serve on the steering committee for the Home Fund effort that got this work jump-started. Market rate housing has been another matter. Action after action taken by the Olympia Council, often in coordination with the legislature, have raised the cost of housing and deterred the construction of more housing, the housing that will be the ultimate solution to the housing availability crisis caused ultimately by the misdeeds of some prominent bankers in 2008. City officials have seriously talked about attracting housing developers while also limiting the potential income from such investments. Seriously, you can't have it both ways. There's too much to say in 3 minutes, so I'll stick to the worst part of this proposal, the relocation assistance provisions. These provisions are thinly veiled rent control. The required relocation assistance for rent increases over 5% annually is so onerous as to essentially eliminate such rent increases, a poison pill that effectively turns the language into rent control. So what's wrong with rent control? A great deal. First, as far as I know, it's still illegal in Washington state. Second, expensive litigation is likely for any jurisdiction that tries it. Third, rent control violates a fundamental rule of public finance, which is that society-wide problems should be funded with society-wide resources, like the Home Fund does, like food stamps do. We don't force Safeway to provide free or reduced price food to people who can't afford it. We provide food stamps or SNAP cards. The financial burden of providing housing to those who cannot afford it should fall on all of us, not just landlords. Fourth, rent control locks in below market rents that landlords voluntarily establish to help people in need, preventing owners from realizing a reasonable return. This is particularly hard on small landlords, many of them retirees seeking to supplement their retirement income, like me. There's a vast literature on the topic of rent control and many years of experience with it in places like New York City. It ain't pretty. Please reject this relocation assistance proposal or put it to the voters, like we did with the home fund. Let the voters decide and provide the funding. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Andrew Barkas. I'm a proud state representative in the 2nd Legislative District in the House of Representatives in Washington State. It's good to be in front of the council this evening. I'm also one of the largest housing providers in Thurston County, owner of Hometown Property Management. We literally housed thousands of Olympia residents over the last 25 years. I'm here today in opposition to the ordinance that the city is contemplating tonight. And the reason is I have been working for the last 8 years as a state representative, leading in a bipartisan way solutions to our housing crisis. This is not a solution. This is a creation of a broader problem. The solution has been found in supply side. I'm proud of the work that I've done over the last several years with a former council member, Representative Bateman, in a bipartisan way to work on some of the most monumental housing supply issues and legislation that the state has ever passed. But it's not enough. We need to do more. I heard this evening that you want solutions. Rent control did not pass the state legislature this year. And the primary reason it did not pass is because there was no collaboration between the parties. You see, the great work that Representative Bateman and I did, and the reason we passed all that housing legislation, 10, 12 pieces of legislation, is because we worked together. We brought all the parties together in real stakeholdering, not just one side, but all parties, from builders to FutureWise to everybody. And everybody was willing to give a little bit. And we all did. And as a result, we passed legislation. Everything that has to do with tenant policy in the state legislature is one-sided. There is no collaboration. The one group that I have not met with that refuses to meet with me, to work with me, is around the tenant advocacy groups. Now, why is that? Because there's an agenda that we're trying to push forward. The policy that you've heard, and you'll hear more tonight about, is unbelievable. Rental relocation assistance requiring property owners to pay for somebody to move because on a $1,500 rent, they got a $75 increase, and they can break their contract with 20 days notice, a contract, a legal binding contract, and you're asking housing providers? I heard somebody say that they mentioned stress, the stress that's being put on. How about the stress on the housing providers? You see, the thing is this, the collaboration that happens when we get together and work on this, which we need to do, policy that I proposed this year was a housing task force. That's what we need to do. Look at the RLTA, not at the local level, but at the state level. And I'll remind you this, you can't have tenants without housing providers. We must work together, so I encourage the city not to do this, but to let's work back with the legislature and do this at a state level. Thank you for letting me share tonight.
Before we bring our next person forward to speak, I just want to remind everybody to please have respect for those who are speaking, and please hold your applause so that we can bring the next person forward and keep the flow of the public comment moving forward. Thank you.
Okay to go?
Yeah, go ahead, Whitney.
All right. My name is Whitney Bowerman. I've been a small landlord in Olympia since 2007. I also run a nonprofit that works with unhoused folks in Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater. 2 years ago, I received a call from a friend at the Housing Authority about a client she had that would be perfect for the studio apartment I was advertising. Born and raised in Olympia, the client had been homeless and struggling with addiction on Wheeler Street until she got pregnant and landed in the Family Support Center shelter. She had no credit, no rental history, had a felony, her voucher could not afford the apartment I was advertising, and she was struggling to find housing because she looked terrible on paper. But would I mind chatting with her, my friend asked? I said, sure, send her my way. She told me her story, and she and her son have now been great tenants of mine for 2 years. This is but one story that I and other small Olympia landlords can share about how we look at tenants as whole human beings. Small landlords are an important part of Olympia's housing palette. They offer lower eviction rates, lower rents, and they screen people in. I am deeply concerned that the regulation being passed by the city and the state is making it more difficult for small landlords to operate, and they are beginning to leave the market. Olympia needs more than Wall Street running its housing. I am also concerned that the city is charging ahead with a lack of vision for how it wants its housing palette to look. This piecemeal popcorn approach to implementing regulation is a recipe for disaster. I implore you to slow down and bring all stakeholders to the table and build a vision. I believe that Olympia needs all hands on deck, small landlords, corporate landlords, public housing entities, in order to adequately address the housing crisis. I believe Olympia needs more than regulation, because regulation on its own is only going to increase prices. Supply needs to be increased as well. Olympia is notoriously difficult to build in, and this needs to be addressed. Please slow down and bring everyone to the table. Utilize the wealth of assets in this community. Allow us to work together to build a housing system that screens people in and not out. And just to go off the cuff for a second, Danny, you mentioned solutions. And my chief concern with all of this is unintended consequences. The tenant protections that were passed in August of 2022, there have been a variety of unintended consequences that have stemmed from that. For example, the limits on pet deposits have resulted in prolific pet rent all over Olympia. I don't want to see more unintended consequences from the implementation of these policies. So just to reiterate what Mr. Barkis said, you need to bring everyone to the table in order to craft these policies, and I think that is a big part of the solution finding, is bring everyone to the table and don't craft these policies in a vacuum. So thanks for your time, everybody.
Please do hold your applause. All right, so next we have Carl Jacobs, followed by Lisa Barkis, followed by Sarah Black.
Good evening, Carl Jacobs. I live in Northeast Olympia. I am in favor of housing assistance to those in need. There's the solution. But I am opposed to the proposed amendments for two primary reasons. First, it is very discouraging to housing providers. You've already passed notice requirements for rent increase, then you passed the registry, licensing, inspection program. Now you're considering rent control, and also appears you're considering limitation on tenant screening. So you're making it very, very difficult and undesirable to be a landlord. I am seriously considering selling my rental, and here's why. I'm a small landlord. I only have one small house with an ADU. It's a lot of work, and it is not a get-rich-quick scheme. I have a full-time day job. I hope my rental appreciates more than what I've put into it, no guarantee. I still have a mortgage, taxes, repairs, and maintenance. I include all city utilities in the rent. My rental is older, 1938. It's nice, but like older homes, it's a little funky, it's got character. Consequently, the rent is below market, AKA affordable, and I don't include all the crazy fees you heard about earlier. It meets basic safety and health, but honestly, I'm not sure it's going to pass all the stuff in the new inspection requirements or the potential future energy audit, so I may have to make significant upgrades. And while my costs, yes, just like everyone else, are going up. And now rent increases will be limited, or I face paying significant relocation. So I don't know if I'll be able to afford that. I'll either have to stay under 5% if I can, or sell. I'm guessing other landlords are considering a similar analysis. The buyers of our homes, I guarantee, will not be other small landlords. It's going to be an owner-occupier, or maybe an investor. It's going to make significant upgrades, jack the rent. So this will lead to less affordable housing. Second reason I'm opposed is that this proposal is simply unfair. I recognize some people are struggling, so if we as a community decide this is something we value, then let's all collectively help out. Let's provide rental assistance on a need basis, just like we do with food and medical assistance. But this proposal shifts the entire burden of that subsidy onto landlords. That is blatantly unfair. An analogy would be to levy a special tax on some small sliver of our population, let's just say everyone between the ages of 40 and 45, say, hey, you get to pay for it. Well, that would also be unfair. That'd be crazy. But if we all chip in, I would personally be happy to pay a little more in taxes to help cover the cost of housing, just like I support food and medical assistance. Not only would that be way more efficient and effective than a cumbersome set of regulations, but it would be fair and we could target the people who truly need help. So I urge you to reconsider, reject this proposal, consider community-based funding for rental assistance. Thanks.
Hello. My name is Lisa Barkis. I'm here as a professional in property management as well as an owner of a rental home within the city of Olympia. Professionally, my husband and I have owned a property management company managing homes in the greater Thurston, Pierce, and Mason counties for many years. In my capacity with our company, I am in charge of going through all the lease renewals. I can attest to the loss of rental homes within the city as a result of the council's passing of overreaching ordinances the past couple of years. Our owners have had no choice but to accept the new regulations placed upon them, beginning with the longer notification requirement for rent increases above certain thresholds. Because of this, we have seen owners choose to sell their properties instead resulting in fewer rental homes in the city of Olympia. Then the council passed the rental registry requiring homeowners to obtain a business license from the state of Washington and registry of their homes with the city. As a result, I have seen even more owners call it quits and are selling their properties, resulting in even fewer homes for rent in your city. Now you propose to inflict more penalties on homeowners with your latest proposal. My husband and I own one last rental property within the city. We've had the same tenant for 7 years. We've kept the home below market value for the entire tenancy. Within the 7 years we've had the home, we've increased the rent $225 total, which averages out to be about $37 per year. Our property taxes have increased over $500 from last year to this year. Our insurance premiums have increased as well, and the cost to maintain the home continues to rise every month. I oppose this proposal in its entirety, especially the increase or the relocation fees that would potentially cost us more than $5,000 if we had to do that. We take care of our tenant. We give her rent credit every Christmas time. Last year she fell on hard times and needed some rental help. We were able to let her discount her rent for a while and gave her 6 months' time to repay what she's owed. Unfortunately, you've tied our hands, and we will be able to, unfortunately, we'll be selling our property. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, so we have Sarah Black, and then it'll be followed by Rob Rothwell, followed by Talana Reed would like to do an... Oh, okay. Okay, so Sarah Black, Rob Rothwell, and then I also have listed again Jonna Vandig, if you would like to speak again.
Good evening, Council. First, I'd just like to say that I wholeheartedly agree with the comments that came before me. I own a property in the city of Olympia that I have as a rental. I also work for Olympic Rentals, which is a property management company. What I would encourage the city to do in considering this or any other regulations regarding housing or really anything regarding our society is to define the problem. I haven't heard that tonight, either with Krista's presentation, and some of the comments that I heard from community members were students living in vehicles or on the street, housing instability for elderly folks, the cost of housing, and homelessness. If those are the issues or issues like that you're trying to solve with the legislation that you're proposing today, I'm not sure. In fact, I know that you haven't hit the mark on it. We've seen with our company, just since the registry began just over 2 weeks ago, several owners in the city of Olympia and even on the outskirts reaching out to us because they're going to sell their properties. Further regulations is going to increase that. We need more housing in our area. I think that is part of the problem, at least from my perspective, and this is not going to solve that. I wish I came here with a solution. I know Councilmember Madrone requested that. I think that Representative Barkus nailed it. We need to work together. We haven't seen that from our perspective as landlords, either through Olympic Rentals, my company, or as a housing provider of my own. I do see a lot of communication with the other side, and I don't think that that is fair to any of us or our society as a whole. So if we can come together and be brought to the table, I do think that we can come with concrete solutions that everyone can live with, and that will benefit everyone in the equation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rob Rothwell with Hometown Property Management. I also live in Olympia over on the west side. We're in the business of renting homes. That's what we do, provide housing to people. Our homeowners, we rent single-family homes. They're not giant corporations. Most are individuals who have happened on the opportunity to own a rental home. They may have inherited the home or been forced to move because of a job or deployment. They aren't making money on these homes. If they are lucky, they're making enough to cover their mortgage, insurance, and property taxes. If there are damages, they're paying out of pocket. If a refrigerator needs replaced, they're paying out of pocket. And that's impacting them personally and their family and their children. They are severely impacted if a tenant does not pay or pays their rent late. They still have to fulfill their obligations or risk losing their home, which in the end hurts the rental industry. It hurts tenants. Policies like this are negatively impacting the rental industry and hurting people's chance to rent in our area. Policies like this are enabling people to make bad choices rather than helping those working hard to change their situation. Enabling policies are hurting people by not leading them to live up to their responsibilities, which is causing damage to renters and the rental industry. Over the last 4 years, we've lost more than 300 rental homes in this area because of owners wanting to sell, because of increased regulations. And it's continuing. Every time a new regulation gets put up, more people are calling us. What do I got to do to sell my home? It's hurting the rental industry. It's hurting people who need to rent homes. The councilman asked, what happens if a tenant trashes a home? Who pays for it? The homeowner does. We had, over the last few years, evictions, an average owing, still owing, of $26,000 per, not total, $26,000 per person that we had to evict because they would not pay their rent. Affordable housing is a problem in our community, but the policies our city is putting forth are not helping to provide affordable housing. They are increasing the cost of housing and putting barriers to housing due to increased expense and risk for housing providers. Thank you.
We'll see if, does John have any? Okay. All right, so next we have Jeff Sowers, followed by Dave Toller, followed by Kent Markley.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. And thank you for bringing forward this proposal. I'll be speaking in favor of passing these measures tonight. I'm a teacher out of East Grays Harbor High School, a small alternative high school in the Elma School District. I work with a lot of kids heading out into the world, and I can tell you they're facing a lot of stress with the housing situation. It's bad in Olympia, and I can tell you it's also very bad in Elma, as a lot of people have been pushed out of Olympia into the outlying areas. Very difficult to find housing there. Not a lot of jobs out there. A lot of these kids want to move into Olympia, but they're looking at the housing market in Olympia, and it's very daunting. So it's a very stressful situation that our youth are facing on this issue. I'm also the former chair of the Thurston County Democrats. I'm a board member of the South Salish Progressive Alliance, who's very supportive of this effort and these proposals that you're making. We are in a housing emergency. Spiraling rents and a lack of affordable housing are literally forcing people out of their homes and into their cars, into couch surfing, and in some cases into homelessness. According to the Thurston County Regional Planning Council data, in 2 years from 2021 to 2023, rent increased by more than 37%, more than 3 times the rate of inflation, and has continued to increase to this day. A big part of what created this terrible situation is high rental demand as people migrated into our area from Seattle and elsewhere, and landlords taking advantage of the housing shortage in making unjustifiable and unfair increases in rent. And I'll say that as a landlord. I'm also a landlord. I have a rental. I've been renting out rentals for about 20 years. I've never had to increase my rent more than 5%. I can't see a justifiable reason to increase rent by more than 5%. And we've seen firsthand the results of no rent stabilization, or call it rent control. This is not rent control. Maybe it's a step toward something like that, but it's not that. It's softer than that. But it's been disastrous, right? We're in a disaster. So all these people who are saying, oh, what about the end? Well, we know the consequences of not doing anything. So enough is enough. It's time to take action. I think the proposals here are very modest. These are reasonable policies. They're going to help stabilize the renting market, provide people with more stable housing, reduce homelessness. A successful rental business does not require outrageous rental increases. Rules restricting rent increases and excessive fees on tenants are so thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Dave Toller, Campaign Coordinator for Olympia for All, and I want to follow up, Jeff, with thanking the Council for bringing this package forward. Olympia for All is an initiative campaign modeled after Tacoma for All. We're a coalition of 12, a growing coalition of 12 community organizations that say we have a serious problem in this community, and we will have probably another 12 coalition members in the next couple of months. So it's incredulous to hear people ask, well, what is the problem out there? 40% rise in rent in less than 3 years. 88% rise in rent in the last 7 years. And we're wondering if we have a problem. We speak about this as if we can just do some assistance for the people, like food stamps. 1/2 of Olympia renters are now facing housing instability. And that is crushing this community, not only with the growing tide of homeless that we have in our community. Our city is bleeding people because they can't afford the rent. They're moving to Lacey, they're moving to Yelm, they're moving out. Why are we closing 2 elementary schools in Olympia? Because people can't afford the rent. I'm sorry you don't hear solutions from the housing industry. We have solutions. We're volunteers. We care about this community. We want the problems fixed, and we really applaud this council for recognizing those problems and starting to address them. We're supposed to believe that there's a business model that says builders are going to build enough inventory so that the rent's going to come crashing down, and they're still going to want to build. Who would believe such a business model? But that's what we're told.
that they're going to just build enough houses, because the rent's got to come down, right? We've already got half of Olympia renters suffering from housing instability. And what does that lead to? That leads to homelessness. That leads to mental health issues. We heard about physical health issues. That leads to small businesses who are being pressed for wage increases by their employees. Number one reason for that is the cost of rent. The rest of the CPI is less than half of what rentals have been in this city. So we've got a problem, and small businesses, tenants, our community is hurting from it. And we're looking to our leaders to come up with some solutions, and I think you have a good start in front of you. We appreciate that, and we invite other landlords to join for some solutions too. But it's more about our community and making sure our community is a good place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. So next we have Kent Markley, followed by Amanda Wolfsburn, followed by Ryan Keller.
Good evening, Council. I am here to speak in support of the proposals put in front of you. I both want to speak in support of it, and I want to congratulate you and thank you. Due to the joys of having a system of government where there are so many different separations, where there are so many different levels, whether it's the state, the federals, it's very easy as elected officials to pass the buck off to somebody else. Sometimes because it's necessary. For example, this body has no ability to do anything about what's going on in Israel and Gaza. That's none of your business. And I'm sure as elected officials, you often get voters concerned to you about things that you have no power to do anything about. This is something you do have something to do something about. And it brings me some sadness, but also some acceptance to hear so many folks say, well, you need the state to take care of it. This is the county's problem. This is somebody else. Please just don't do anything more. Let somebody else do it. Please don't let them convince you that you need to pass the buck off to somebody else. This is something that is within your purview, that you do have the power to do something else about. And I would love to extend my gracious thanks that you have voluntarily allowed to do this, particularly those of you on the Land Use Committee. I also really want to express my gratitude that we've come into this space with an intention to hear every side of the story, and for everyone to sort of go in with a collaborative mindset as far as how to handle the extreme cost of housing in this area. One thing that frustrates me, though, is that when I hear many property owners talk on that issue, it sounds like the only people they want to be in the room are the property owners. In that hypothetical context, tenants would be there too, right? I think that my rent going up $200 in the last year is a lot. I think that we need to take action here, and that the proposals put in front of you are pretty reasonable. After all, the idea of us coming together and collaborating, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing here? You're hearing both sides of the story. I don't think that we need to put this off to some other place for us to talk about it with everybody involved, because everybody involved is already here. We can make the decision now, hypothetically, or rather when you vote on it in April. As such, I would like to just point out the comments that of the proposals put here, they're pretty sensible. Is it really such an outrageous cost to any landlord to allow for their tenant to put in an air conditioner in the summer? Which landlord specifically is going to end up raising their rent over 5% and it's going to be so burdensome to them that they're going to have to sell? I recognize that this is going to be an expense for them, and as such, it's totally understandable that they would oppose it. But I also really want to extend my appreciation that you are willing to listen to the tenant's side of this story. And I highly encourage you to have the courage to do something about this. Do not rely on the legislature to do anything, as they demonstrated this year. They're not gonna. They're gonna pass the buck off to somebody else, like is so typical for so many problems in our country. Have courage. Help us solve this problem. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Amanda Walsborn. Not great at public speaking, but I moved to Olympia in 2014 and purchased my first home. And these are topics that are really important to me. So I just want to put that out there. I'm also a professional property manager and have seen firsthand what all of the policies that have already been put in place has had like other people have said, negative effects or unintended consequences, I should say. One of the topics I want to talk about right now is about the screening policies that are being proposed. We've already had deposit policies placed and capped in the city of Olympia, and in the past, the company I work for, Olympic Rentals, has tried to work with residents and make exceptions if they don't make our policies, maybe have a slightly increased deposit and things like that, and that was our way to help people have a second chance at rentals. Now we don't have that option. They're capped at one time the rent, and pet deposits are also capped. And so that's kind of tied our hands for our owners. Our responsibility is to them, and if we can't recoup that risk, then we can't rent to, people that we may have in the past. And then I just want to also say that a lot of the municipalities that we're pulling examples from, I find very interesting, being that all of those municipalities have historically terrible rental markets and high rental rates, and the policies that have been put in place there had no positive correlation or causation in the rental market, if not made it worse. Philadelphia, for one, back in 2021, if my research is correct, the rental market was historically below the national rate. And they put into some of these screening policies into place. And not saying that it's a causation, but there is a correlation. The rental rates have skyrocketed, and they are at or above national average now. So, the screening policies are one thing that we have left to protect ourselves and owners in placing tenants. And so I would just ask that that be taken into consideration moving forward. Thank you.
All right, so as Ryan Keller approaches, we have Desiree Tolliver and then Star Grolinski.
Hi. I did not prepare anything tonight, so I'm just speaking, and I'm not a good public speaker, so bear with me. But I think I'm coming to you guys with a different perspective. I work at Olympic Rentals as well, but I am not a homeowner. I am a renter, and I am also 21 years old, and I'm a very young adult. So I understand the struggles of the high rent, and I struggle with it every day. However, working in property management, I have gotten to see the perspective of the homeowners, and I've gotten to see a different side of things that I don't think that most tenants take the time to understand. And I think that being able to be a tenant is a privilege as much as it is high at the moment. There's no way that I could afford to buy a home right now. And so being able to rent my home, being able to be a renter is very important. And I'm also a student. So people tonight have talked about how they're students and they can't afford anything. I'm doing it all. I'm seeing both perspectives, and I think that what you guys are doing is going to push all of the homeowners away that are renting their homes out to people that are providing housing to people in our city. And I don't want to see that happen, and I don't want to see my friends not be able to have housing. I work with people who they all own their own houses. They're providing their houses. They're trying to help the people in the city. I just don't think what you guys are doing is fair to them, and I think it's important for me as a renter to be able to tell you guys, yes, it's hard right now, but I'm doing it. I'm a student. I'm doing it. I'm a young adult, and that's all I have to say is it's a privilege to rent because there's no way that I could be in a position to own right now. So please do not pass what you guys are trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Desiree Tolliver, I know we had you for public comment. Were you also interested in the public hearing?
Okay. Hi. So I just wanted to talk about my experience. I was unhoused for about 7 months. The only reason I'm not unhoused right now is because I essentially just kept cussing everybody out. Not actually cussing at them, but correcting them on the fact that they kept saying that my daughter and I were not priority. I want to make it clear, my daughter and I were in my car through the Seattle freeze, and according to the rules that are set in place during COVID, we did not qualify for a hotel because they said that I had a car, so that is another option. I don't know if you guys remember, but this last December, people died who slept in their car, and that's not the first time people have died sleeping in their car. The first time that I became unhoused, which I had a partner at the time, so I just lived with them, but if I did not have them, I would have been screwed. My rent rose from almost $900 to $1,100. My job, State Farm, decided to leave the state. My car broke down, and then because of the hormone-producing brain tumor, which actually a lot of people have them, they just don't activate, I went through psychosis. All of those things led to me not having anywhere to live. I couldn't look for another place to live because my job was leaving the state, but my job was leaving the state in like 11 months. So it was such a weird time, but I did not want to be 11 months from there in a new apartment complex and not be able to pay rent because I don't know if you guys know this, but now the nearest place to do claims adjusting is in Progressive, or is in Federal Way with Progressive, or Fife, whatever. There are so many over-encompassing issues, and realistically, small landlords, according to all HUD documents, are greatly in charge of the economy where they live as long as there's not too much densifying of outer communities. I wish if small landlords did not act as enemies of the people, which Hometown Property Management, I know I just talked to them, but I have my own personal beef because when I was making $35 an hour after graduating, in 2021 as part of the All Washington academic team, meaning I was in the top 2% of the state grade-wide for community and trade, whatever technical colleges. I still could not get housing, and I applied at Hometown Property Management as one of them, but because while I was in school, I couldn't be on the lease because I did not make 3 times the rent, even though my partner did. They said that I had no proof that I lived anywhere. He just told me that there was adverse action, which was available. I don't know what adverse action is, but nobody offered that to me, and I would like to remind you, I was making $35 an hour. There's also this AI score that a lot of companies use. A lot of people are actually looking deeply into that AI score stuff because it is racist. There's no reason that people can consistently be denied over and over and over again. There is no exemplary or anything. The landlords are intentionally not working with people. Hometown Property Management doesn't rent to people with a 600 credit score but late payments because of they claim city policy. So, come on.
Thank you, Desiree. So their final in-person comment or public hearing tonight, Star Grolinski.
Okay, howdy, thank you for having me, and thank you to everybody for coming out and expressing where you're at with your stability and finances. I guess I'd like to start with saying that I had some housing instability last year, and it was so freaky. I was really, really scared, and I can't imagine how scared I'd have been if I had a kid, too. That's all.
Thank you, Star. We're now going to move to our virtual public comment. And again, going to call a few names, and I know that there's some ushering that staff has to do behind scenes to get folks to come on over. And so when your time is, when your time starts, go ahead and unmute your mic, and then at that time, just go ahead and public comment, and you can also turn on your camera if you would like. So first we have Kelly Britz, followed by Jeanette Savage-App, followed by Judy Barden.
Kelly and Jeanette are not in the queue right now, but Judy is ready.
Okay, so I'll just go ahead and mark that, and then we can come back around. Since Judy is ready, Judy Barden, if you would like to unmute your mic and go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. I have concerns about the proposed rental regulations. First, there are a lot of new regulations in a very short period of time. In 2022, the city passed their initial regulations. At the end of 2023, the rental registry was passed, and it is now just being implemented with a housing inspection and checklist presently under development. Landlords are trying to wrap their heads around these new requirements, and now the city is proposing even more onerous regulations. As part of the registry, the city will be collecting data on rents. This data will enable you to see who is charging exorbitant rents. Wouldn't it make sense to look at this data and target groups that are charging high rents? I would bet it's not your small landlords. Another question is, why is the city choosing a target of a 5% rent increase when the legislature in the session was using 7% as their cap in the final version of House Bill 2114? Still, these regulations will be counterproductive because in many cases, they will actually raise rents. With all these new complicated regulations, many landlords will decide to hire a management company. These companies charge about 10% of the monthly rent. These costs will be tacked on to rents, increasing costs. It will also lead landlords to automatically take a 5% rent increase because they fear they may not be able to raise rents when they need to for such things as big repairs. Presently, many landlords do less than a 5% rent increase or raise rents infrequently. One question I have about the proposed regulations: if a landlord gives a tenant relocation assistance, which is like 2 months rent at a minimum, and doesn't move out, and the tenant doesn't move out of the unit, the tenant is supposed to pay the landlord back the money. How will the landlord be refunded if the tenant doesn't comply? There's no mechanism for that. Lastly, limiting a landlord's ability to screen tenants is unreasonable. We are handing over the keys to a home, and we need to know our units will be taken care of. That's the prime concern. You don't want damage to your unit. Renters will be lawful, and that rents can be covered. Please exempt small landlords from these requirements. We are not the ones causing the problems. Also, you will lose many small landlords, such as myself. Thank you so much.
All right, next up we have Gordon Wheat. And since I'm seeing Whitney Bowerman in the audience, we are not doing a virtual. I just accidentally did that. All good. So Gordon Wheat followed by Kelly Britz and Jeanette Savage, if they are in the queue.
Gordon is not in the queue. I haven't seen Kelly or Jeanette, but Brandon is ready.
Okay, thank you. All right, so calling forward Brandon Raftery, and looks like you just unmuted, and you can go ahead and start with your comments.
Hey there, I'm a person that's been running or providing housing in Olympia for, you see, over 10 years now. In the past, I've attended a lot of the council meetings on crucial housing issues, but honestly, I kind of feel like it's almost a charade now. And a lot of these things you're just going to pass and put in more additional implementations. It feels like the council oftentimes is trying to just kind of work with large developers and institutions to address the housing crisis and not really addressing the smaller concerns with housing providers like myself. I have 23 rental units in Thurston County, 11 of which in our Olympia. Did that mainly through kind of trading up, 1031 exchanges and stuff like that. I grew up kind of working middle class. I also have a W-2 job and a 1099 job. And with all that, I'm still nowhere near like a 1%er, anything like that. And with the units I have, you know, I don't have hundreds of units. So a lot of these regulations being proposed aren't just a statistical nuisance to me. They can cause real issues. Rules, you know, like allowing tenants to break the lease with only a 20-day notice makes it impossible for me to really plan my life around things. You know, there's so many protections right now for tenants. My sister, also, I got her into rental properties, and she had a tenant that got into drug addiction. Took her over 6 months to get the person out, over $10,000 in legal fees, not counting, you know, the missed rental income. And they also did over $20,000 in damages to her property. This over a year ago. She did get a judgment against them, but she hasn't received a dime of that. I feel like the proposal on rental registration too is particularly ill-timed, especially with a lot of the inflation we're seeing over the past couple of years. 5% when, you know, your property taxes are going up 30%, 100%, things like that just doesn't seem reasonable. And kind of like Marcus said, you know, a $75 fee could cost the landlord $3,000, $5,000, something like that. So anyways, looks like my time's almost up. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill First, Dwayne Triplett Jr., and then I'm seeing, I think, Christina Daniels in the audience here.
Bill is on his way. He should be able to unmute.
Bill First, if you're able to hear us, your time is starting now, so you can go ahead and unmute and come off camera and share your comments with us.
He's unmuting now. But not showing a camera.
Okay.
I'm not sure if he's having technical difficulties.
All right, Bill, if you're having any, if you're still with us and you're having any technical difficulties, please do feel free to chat with staff, but we'll come back around after we let a couple more people share their comments. So next we have Dwayne Triplett Jr.
Dwayne is not showing in the queue, but Christina is here.
All right, so we'll ask Christina Daniels to come to the podium.
Sorry for the user error on the sign up. So Christina Daniels, I'm here tonight. We're representing Thurston County Realtors Association. The hat I'm wearing tonight is their Government Affairs Co-Director. I just have a statement that was written by the board to share with you tonight. On behalf of the Thurston County Realtors Association, a professional trade organization committed to upholding the principles of homeownership, ethical standards, and professionalism in the real estate sector, I address you today. Representing the interests and concerns of over 800 members, including our board of directors, I wish to convey the following. We strongly encourage the council to carefully evaluate and refrain from any actions that may negatively impact the health of our local real estate environment. The current economic landscape has placed significant strain on the market, affecting both residential properties, including single-family, multifamily, and commercial ventures. In Washington State, we are witnessing a downturn in investment towards new construction for single-family and multifamily homes, as well as the upkeep of existing rental properties. Our market is in constant competition with other regions for real estate investments, which are crucial for housing and other property developments. Therefore, it's imperative that state and local taxation and regulatory practices do not further destabilize an already delicate housing market or detour future investment in our housing infrastructure. Ensuring the continuation of a robust housing sector in our area necessitates a considerate approach towards regulation that includes safeguarding the interest of investors, homeowners, and residents alike. We appreciate your consideration in the matter and your ongoing commitment to the well-being of the community's housing market. Signed, Tracy Choate, our 2024 president. So that's the end of the message. And then I just personally want to thank city staff for having open communication with the association. We've met with them many times. We love being a part to be one of the stakeholders at the group. So thank you for council for encouraging that, and thank you for staff for meeting with us.
Thank you. Kelly, were we able to figure out that snafu with Bill?
Bill said he is struggling to unmute himself. Doesn't seem to be working.
Okay. I'm not sure if Bill can hear us right now, but just in case, maybe you could message them, encouraging them to share their comments via email.
I did just that.
Lovely. So next we have Melissa Knight, followed by Ann Knapp, followed by Walter Jorgensen.
Melissa and Ann are not in the queue currently, but Walter is ready to move over.
All right. Well, then we'll call forward Walter Jorgensen.
Kelly, is he moving over?
He is over. He is over and just needs to unmute and turn on his camera.
Okay, Mr. Jorgensen, can you hear us?
I just did.
Okay, there you are. Mr. Jorgensen, we can hear you.
Okay, let's see. Oh my God, now I can see myself too. Wasn't ready for that. Okay, good. I'm thinking we should start these things. You should start them with a big sign that says, "Yes, we can hear you," for God's sakes, get with it. My point, and this is a baby with the bathwater point, half my tenants pay less than their full rent because they can't. They are all good people. Some have solved or at least improved their money problems and have resumed paying full rent. One young professional woman years ago went over half a year without a job. Then one day she was accepted as a legal partner and paid up her arrears rent all at once. That was a good day. Just last fall, I experienced only my third eviction in 50 years of renting. All three were for good cause, lots of notice, and accomplished without legal entanglements. I've only once raised a current tenant's rent. I'm speaking tonight for myself and my fellow small landlords. The new rules you have in the pipeline will impact us disproportionately compared to large corporate landlord property owners. It doesn't take 97% less work to collect, verify, and provide data to the city on 3 rental units than on 100. There is a baseline of effort needed before you start to reap the efficiencies of large numbers. The administrative overload alone will dissuade some small landlords from persevering. Add to that extra expenses weighing down on the rental rate structures that are already marginal, and having to navigate a bramble bush of new regulations, deadlines, and penalties. Many, if not most, small landlords will opt for paying a rental management business or selling their properties. Both options will result in higher rents because the buyers will include mostly corporate landlords and people buying homes for themselves, not for rentals. In fact, because 72 and a half, not to put too fine a point on it, of single unit rental properties are owned by individuals, according to the IRS income tax data in 2021. So because of that, what you are proposing will have a very large impact. Please reconsider. Exempt landlords with 5 or fewer units. I really hope you can sort this out. And I have to add, after hearing your first testifier tonight, I know Bob Jacobs, and I really like his analogy of food stamps. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, so next we have Brogan Thompson, followed by Sherry Piles, followed by Brian Bouchard.
Brian, Sherry, and Brogan are not currently in the queue, but Tyler is there and ready to move.
Okay, so we'll call forward Tyler Oster. And Tyler, if you can hear us, you can go ahead and unmute your mic and come on camera to share your comments.
He is traveling now.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, Olympia City Council. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Tyler, and I hope you can join me in rejecting these additional rent regulations in Olympia. I'm a very small housing provider in Western Washington, and I actually co-own 2 rental properties in the city of Olympia. And on a monthly basis, we charge our tenants a very fair market rent, and we barely break even because of all the rising operating costs to manage our properties. If these additional rent regulations were to pass, my co-owners and I will simply not be able to keep up with all the increases in property taxes, maintenance and repair costs, utility rates, and other operating expenses. My co-owners and I are not making it financially as it is, and we are running out of reserves for expenses such as maintenance and repair costs. What would happen is if these rent regulations pass, we'd have to defer many of our maintenance and repair costs, which would ultimately lead to lower quality rentals for our tenants, which is what we want to avoid. It's also unfair that housing providers would have to provide our tenants with 3 months of rent as relocation assistance if we do need to raise rent above the 5% threshold to compensate for the rising operating expenses that we must endure as housing providers. We are basically being penalized for keeping our rental rates below the fair market value these past several years, especially during the COVID pandemic. The $10 late fee is also unreasonable because it makes it pointless for a tenant to pay rent on time. Tenants will have less incentive to make on-time rent payments. We will also start seeing an increase in non-payment of rent if this policy passes, and as you know, our courts are already backlogged with unlawful detainer cases. Could we consider this solution? This can be avoided if we have a more reasonable late fee cap for everyone, like $100 or 5% of the monthly rental amount, which would discourage tenants to pay rent late or not pay on time. On a personal level, it's just unfair, and I feel like it's disrespectful that all of us, small landlords, are put in this box of rent gouging and that we're evil or that we are the villain. These claims are most often not true. In fact, from my personal experience, we actually try to work with our tenants to provide a fair place or fair market rent price, and we try to keep a quality unit by repairing our units and being good communicators, responding to our tenants' needs. And honestly, we don't really enjoy raising rent, whether it's 2%, 3%, 4%, which is usually what if we do need to raise rent, we usually do increase it by a really small amount, but we must do so sometimes in order to pay for our rising operating costs. Please reject these additional rent regulations, and I thank you for your time today, and thank you for listening to my testimony.
Thank you, Tyler. So next we have Elisa Lyles, followed by Daniel Banyan.
Elisa is there. I'm just waiting for her to travel over. Try again. Just a little stubborn. Ah, there she goes.
Elisa Lyles, you can go ahead and unmute your mic and share your comments.
She's not showing up, though. They said she was traveling over her. She is back. Okay.
Kelly, has she traveled over?
She went and then came back, so I'm not sure if there's a projection of it. If you'd like, I think Daniel is also in line. I can continue. Oh, she declined to be promoted. That's what's going on.
Thank you.
Okay. And so, and it doesn't look like, so Elisa Lyles is somewhere, but not where they need. Okay.
Yeah, turn down the opportunity.
Okay, and so did Daniel, is that correct?
I am getting Daniel over right now, and I'm hoping he still wants to participate.
Okay.
Yes, he's joining as a panelist. So.
Okay.
Hello, Councilor, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Daniel Bannon, and I'm calling in on behalf of the Rental Housing Association Washington and over 5,000 small housing providers from across the state. All of the proposed policies today will harm small housing providers who are simply trying to maintain their livelihood, and the Rental Housing Association encourages the council to pursue other options when trying to regulate housing. The most concerning provision that is being discussed tonight is the combination of the relocation assistance and the allowance to let a resident break a lease with 20 days notice for any rent increases of over 5%. Allowing a resident to break a lease with only 20 days notice in response to a rent increase will destabilize term-based leases and create uncertainty for housing providers in the city of Olympia. A lease is a mutually agreed upon contract, and this style of policy effectively nullifies this agreement if a rent increase of over 5% is served. Lease terms are created to end at a time that provides the best opportunity for housing providers to find a new resident and allow residents to find the right rental home. Destabilizing this process will harm both housing providers and residents, as it will remove consistency from term-based lease provisions. Relocation assistance has imposed astronomical penalties on housing providers for providing reasonable rent increases in cities such as Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellingham. The penalties detailed could cripple our small housing providers who are just trying to get by, and it will reduce a housing provider's ability to properly maintain their unit and their other properties due to the financial strain, which will negatively impact their other residents. Furthermore, incredibly restrictive late fee caps will make on-time rent payments a thing of the past. We've already seen the negative impact of these kinds of policies in cities like Seattle and Tacoma, and we do not want to bring these negative impacts to the city of Olympia. On-time rent payments allow for housing providers to provide the highest level of service to their residents, and removing late fees essentially for rent payments will show small housing providers that you are not concerned about the issues they're facing. RHA believes that caps are inherently harmful, but at the bare minimum, percentage-based caps are less harmful and more equitable than specific monetary caps. I'm asking you today to please stand up for the small business housing providers in your community. Housing providers are some of the most regulated small businesses in Washington state, and this continues to drive people out of the market, which increases rental housing prices. We need to focus on increasing the supply of rental housing and not punishing housing providers for simply trying to operate their businesses. The Rental Housing Association remains ready and willing to discuss alternative measures that have proven to make housing more affordable, such as rental assistance. And we appreciate the time of the council members who did take the time to meet with us before these policies came to council. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Daniel. So that's everyone for our virtual public comment tonight. And so anyone else, if we could just encourage them to submit their comments via email. And so I'll return it back to the mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So it's standard practice during a public hearing that we open it up for those present in the chambers who haven't had the opportunity to speak in regards to this issue. If you would like to come forward now, now is your opportunity to come to the podium if you'd like to speak. And as you approach, I ask that you please adhere to the 3-minute time restriction, and also for the record, please introduce your name before you begin your comments. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Grant. I want to say that I came as a peaceful socialist activist, and I don't want to say that I'm encouraging violent class warfare. What I'm saying is I feel like capitalism is just a bleeding organ that is just dying out, and we need a new system in Washington State. But I believe that we also need to work with capitalists, but I also believe that upcoming class warfare is definitely on the horizon, and I believe it would be worse if Trump comes to office.
Thank you very much.
Hello. My name is Lavender. I'm a tenant. I'm a member of the Olympia chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, and I'm a longtime union member. Specifically, I'm a member of AFSCME Local 3758 and a delegate to the Thurston Lewis Mason Central Labor Council. And although I want to emphasize that my comments tonight in support of these rental protections come from me as an individual and do not necessarily represent the views of my organizations, I do want to note that all 3 of these organizations have endorsed the Olympia for All Tenant Bill of Rights initiative. I've been a resident of Olympia for over 9 years, and I work at the public library. Libraries are something of an anomaly in our capitalist system, a public place, a third place where people can exist, can learn, can grow without paying money, without being measured by the weight of their wallets. As a library worker, I've seen firsthand the human cost of our inhuman for-profit housing system. Every day I see the refugees of a medieval system, literally presided over by lords, where human beings, students, teachers, family, friends, and lovers are thrown to the streets like so much trash. These renter protections will not end this system, but it will greatly ease the human costs of that system. I sincerely hope that the council will pass these renter protections, but if they don't, tenants are prepared to take matters into our own hands, to pass the Tenant Bill of Rights through the Olympia for All ballot initiative. We, workers, tenants, and our allies, fought and won in Tacoma under the Tacoma for All Tenant Bill of Rights, and we are prepared to fight and win in Olympia for the Olympia for All Tenant Bill of Rights. Thank you.
Hi, my name is April Miller. I'm a tenant, a food service worker, a recovering addict, and a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. What you have heard from the landlord class tonight is a vision of a world in which housing can only come from them and can only be managed by the whims of the market. This is not the reality in which we must live. Housing is a human right, not a commodity. It is the bedrock of people's lives. That it is subject to the profit motive is a crime. Speakers against the modest regulations you have proposed invoke the specter of the units they own vanishing into the ether or being bought by the big landlords they assure you they are not. Whatever happened to public ownership? If these landlords really care so much about their housing stock not falling into the hands of developers and want to ensure it is used to give people housing, why can't they work with the city to establish a program by which they can sell their units to the public to be operated in the interests of the public? What they are really telling you when they invoke having to sell their properties is that their bottom line is profit, and that they would rather sell to the highest bidder than allow their investments to be taken out of the market and to meet human needs instead. I would also just like to state that policies much like those which have been proposed have been enacted in other municipalities in our region without the sky falling. Tacoma's housing market has not spontaneously collapsed. Do not let a well-funded special interest group blackmail you into abandoning the most basic measures necessary to give tenants the breathing room necessary to navigate the housing crisis. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Derek Rudder. I'm just here speaking sort of extemporaneously. I didn't mean to speak tonight, but I wanted to address Councilman Gilman's question from earlier about, well, what happens when, you know, how does a landlord collect when a tenant moves out and perhaps there's damage, or maybe they just want some more money. I moved out of one of the sort of local slum buildings run by an institutional landlord in 2020, finally, after staying in one of those mold-infested apartments for about 9 years, and things were in mostly good condition. However, there was wear and tear on the carpets and the blinds and a few other, you know, sort of things that wear and tear. And they not only withheld my deposit, but they sent me a bill, sent me an invoice, and for these items, and I said, well, this can't be right. These are wear items, and they said, we really suggest that you pay this. It could have implications for your credit score, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, unlucky for them, they sort of messed with the wrong tenant. I had the wherewithal to understand that I had rights as a tenant. I got in contact with the lawyer and had them print on letterhead, you know, there are Washington state standards for wear and tear items. You know, this is a 3-year carpet. These are 2-year blinds. The tenant has been occupying for 9 years, cease and desist essentially, and they back down after that. But I have to ask, you know, how many tenants moving out of that kind of a situation have the wherewithal to engage the legal system, to fight for their rights? You know, I paid for this lawyer a non-trivial amount. You know, it makes you wonder about the power dynamics at play between especially institutional landlords and these tenants. And so I encourage you to take that into account as you consider policies moving forward. You know, there is a power imbalance between a business who is considering risks on their ledger and a tenant. And also, landlords do not provide housing as a point of semantics. They own housing, and they extract the literal rents on that surplus for the purposes of profit, and the socialists are right. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Hello there. Hi.
I am Ayana. I'm 8. I care about the people who ask for help and try to stay alive. Some people don't really make it.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, with that, it looks like that concludes the public comment on this hearing. What I will say is before we move on, is that no action will be taken this evening on this matter. It is scheduled to come before the council again on our agenda on April 9th. So with that being said, we've heard quite a bit here this evening that we will talk amongst ourselves, also with city staff. And I do hear the community asking for more engagement and to define the problem. And I will say that we have data-driven decision-making processes that has led us to this point. And so that point is noted. And I ask that when the presentation comes before us again on April 9th, that we begin the presentation with defining the problem and the data that backs and supports that problem. So at this time, I am going to close the public hearing on rental assistance and additional renter protections. So that takes us to our other items of business this evening, which is item 6A, which is to receive a briefing regarding the automated license plate reader cameras implementation plan, which will be presented to us this evening by Rich Allen, the city's chief of police.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. For the record, Rich Allen, police chief. And tonight I should have with me Mac, who's floating in cyberspace out there somewhere, if he's still with us. And tonight we're talking about automated license plate readers. Mac is from the company that we're looking at using, so he's gonna bail me out and help me out with any techie kind of questions you guys have for me. So before we dive into the technology, I just want to take a minute and talk about stolen vehicles in general. So for the last several years, not only in our city, but our region and our state, auto thefts have been on the rise. As you can see on that graph, last year we did slightly better than we did in '22, but when you compare it to this 5-year period, the 303 auto thefts that we had is still a very high number for us. Out of those 303 auto thefts, 27 of them were only attempts, auto theft attempts, so that took us down to 276, and out of those 276, we were able to recover 262 of them. So of the cars that were stolen from Olympia, these are where the cars were recovered. So from the Olympia stolen vehicles, almost 36% of them were recovered here in Olympia. So they were stolen from Olympia and recovered in Olympia. Almost 23% ended up in Pierce County, and almost 11% were outside the city limits, but were still within Thurston County. On the right there, you can see by far the most, I'm sorry, let me start with this. Out of those cases, 31 of those incidents we were able to make arrests on. So 276 vehicles were recovered, 31 of them we were able to make arrests on. And as you can see, white males make up by far the highest category of the arrest that we made. And at the bottom of the slide there, you see the Olympia residence number. And this is a number I want to start tracking. It's not easy. It's not a data point that we can simply pull just by running a report. We have to do a hand search. But of the people that we arrested, only 43% of them were Olympia residents. So more than half of the people that we arrest are criminals coming from out of our area, coming in here to victimize our community. So I think that's an important piece of the story to tell, and it's a number that I want to keep tracking as we continue. So I just talked about the vehicles that were stolen from Olympia and recovered in Olympia. So now this graph shows the vehicles that were stolen from other jurisdictions but were recovered in Olympia. And there was 71 of those, down slightly from the year prior. Seems like lately we can't turn on the news without seeing some story about a crime that involves a stolen car. And here you can see these are all local examples. They're not things I pulled off the internet. The cars are being used as burglary implements themselves, right? The suspects are stealing a car, they're ramming the car through the front of the business, they run inside, grab some product, and then they hop in a separate car and leave. So that's by far the most, that's the crime that's on the rise for us the most, is using these vehicles as implements. They're also used in armed robberies and organized retail theft. So currently, how we're trying to combat this, this rise in auto thefts is we're using our social media to try and do some crime prevention tips, showing the public how to not get their car stolen in the first place, right? We're, as you guys might have seen on the news, Hyundai and Kia, they were the kind of the leaders of the pack in terms of getting their cars stolen. They've since done some fixes for that. They've offered the club, as you can see there on the left. So we've tried promoting those fixes and opportunities for people to make it more difficult to get your car stolen. And then obviously we make arrests as often as we can. But we're looking around the landscape and trying to figure out what else we can do to try and address this regional issue. And we keep thinking there must be some technology out there that can help us out. And the more research we do, the more we keep coming back to Flock Safety. So Flock Safety is a company that makes and sells automated license plate readers. And there's a picture of them on the slide there. They're a small camera that's mounted onto a pole, typically a traffic light pole at an intersection, and it takes a still image of vehicles that drive by. The camera captures the license plate, and it takes what they call a kind of a thumbprint of the vehicle. It captures the make and model and whether it was a four-door, what color it was, all that kind of stuff. So everything that the company needs to make that happen is inside that camera. So there's really no infrastructure when we're looking at, what if we went with this system, what we'd have to do on our side. Really no infrastructure. Everything is located within the camera itself. The cameras provide 24/7 coverage. The camera not only takes a still image of the vehicle and notes the characteristics, but at the same time, it uses cell phone technology and accesses databases. And it checks to see if the car is stolen, wanted in some other crime, or it checks to see if it's the subject of a silver or an amber alert. So it does all that in a nanosecond, and if a vehicle is wanted or does have one of those alerts that returns to it, it sends an alert to all the police officers in Olympia, or it will. The cameras take pictures only of they only document the vehicle characteristics. They don't take note of how many people were in the car or any demographic information of the people in the car. It's not facial recognition. It's not a traffic cam. It's not a red light cam, anything like that. It is for license plate recognition, and it gathers objective evidence about the vehicle. Like I said, what color it is, what, how many doors it has, does it have a roof rack, those types of things. It alerts for wanted vehicles, and it stores it stores the information in a database for 30 days. And that database can be used to help solve other crimes. Like if we get a description of a suspect vehicle that's a white four-door with a roof rack and it was in this area at this time, we can go into that database and search, and this the software will pop up every vehicle that matches the description that we entered, and then you can start looking at license plates, possibly finding your suspect. Again, it's not facial recognition. It does not gather and store any personal identifying information. You cannot go into this database and say, show me every white four-door sedan that was driven by a white male. You can't do that. It doesn't track any data associated with occupants of the vehicle. Like I said, it's not used for traffic enforcement, and the data is stored on the server for 30 days. We are in charge of the data. Flock doesn't sell the data, doesn't share it with anybody. It's our data to use as we see fit, and we control who has access to that data. It stays in their system for 30 days, like I said. There's really no human bias. This is not artificial intelligence. The computer system doesn't do anything with this information. All it does is house it. It doesn't process it. It doesn't make any interpretations. It just simply houses the information. And it takes a human, AKA an investigator, to go into that database and start making some assumptions. Every time an investigator or an officer accesses the database to search for information, there's an automated audit trail that will be made public on a public-facing dashboard. Like I said, it's not facial recognition, no personal identifying information, not used for traffic, and it's not connected to any Department of Licensing info. That's a whole different database. And there is a transparency portal that's optional. Of course, we'll get it. This is a copy or a screenshot of Centralia's transparency portal. And I did a bad job of screenshotting this. Towards the bottom of that, on the left there, there will be a little icon you can click, and it will produce a Excel spreadsheet showing how many times the data has been accessed and what the reason was for. So it's really transparent. These are the agencies that have the cameras in Washington. A whole lot of Eastern Washington agencies there, but if you look close, you can see Lakewood, Tukwila, Kent, Centralia, Pacific, Des Moines. So it is making its way to Western Washington. Our regional partners are also looking at this. Tumwater is roughly in the same process that we are. They're presenting it to their council, and their contracts are in a legal review with their legal departments. Thurston County is a little bit behind us, but they're also moving forward with this. And Lacey, for right now, is in a holding pattern. They have a lot going on with their new police department, their new training facility, so it's kind of a capacity bandwidth issue for them. So they're going to tackle this at a later time. Whole lot of success stories, so I'll just fly through a couple of these real quick. Here, a homicide suspect was located using this technology and the database back in 23 for Tukwila. Yakima really claims to have a lot of success with this. This slide is old, so these numbers are more impressive now, but they started in 22. They've used it to help solve 11 homicides, a whole bunch of robberies, police evasions, which are eluding, right? Someone trying to run away from us, a bunch of weapons offenses, hit and runs, and obviously stolen cars. Yakima in 2023 had a 13% decrease in robberies and a 26% decrease in property damage, and they attribute that decrease to the success from the flock system. Couple of examples. One here is a silver alert. Got the loved one back with the family within an hour, and they located the car within 15 minutes, but within an hour the person was back home. Again here with an Amber alert. Alert went out at 12:30, and by 6 o'clock at night, the child was back home with mom. So those are great stories. So our approach, we looked at the software we wanted. We worked with Flock, came up with a price, got a grant through the Department of Commerce that'll cover us for 2 years. I wanted 2 years just to get a little more bang for the buck, and we're already coming up on budget season, so I didn't want to have to make some determination, right? I wanted to get a little history to make a good case to keep them. So got a 2-year contract, and after a year, we'll take a look at the data and see if the cameras need to be moved around at all. But this is what it will look like. Not very impressive looking. It's 16 cameras. I didn't have enough money to spread it all over the city, but we're surrounding the Capitol Mall, and we threw a couple out east. I know there's not 16 X's up there, but if you think about it, some roadways take 1 camera and your bigger ones take 4. So it adds up pretty quickly. And with that, I just want to say that I presented this info to the Community Livability and Public Safety back on February 8th, and there was a unanimous support of the direction we're going, and no formal action is required tonight, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Chief. And I'll just add on to that, I believe that council action is not required for this,
I'm sorry,
this kind of
what did I
implementation.
say?
No, you said the right thing.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just adding on to
Oh.
what you just said.
Okay.
So this is a courtesy to our residents of our community so that they know what is going on. And so, but with that, I will turn it over to comments from the dais. Councilmember Madrone.
I think the confusing thing you said was there was no action needed tonight.
Oh,
and so
thank you, yeah.
This is a comment. Why would, I guess I just turned it into a question, but you don't have to answer it. Why would somebody not just throw a hammer through a window when they're stealing? Like stealing a car, ramming it through a window, why not throw a hammer? You don't have to answer that. My question actually, though, is around public records. And so retaining the data for 30 days. And sorry, I had to step out for a quick break, so maybe you said this in your presentation. But how does this work with public records to hold on to data for just 30 days?
It complies with the, I guess I don't have a great answer for you. I can get back with you on the specifics, but it does comply with the records retention law. These records are subject to public disclosure, right? If we get a request, we're gonna have to produce it. My understanding is that the license plate is something that we can redact. So it's an identifiable piece of info that we can redact from that public disclosure request. So I'm not sure how many public disclosure requests we're gonna get because I don't know what the attraction would be. But I can get you a way better answer and I'll send it to you.
Yeah, and I didn't ask my question very well, actually, because I did mean retention. We have the 7-year retention of, public records. That's what I was trying to get at. But that knowing that license plate numbers can be redacted is really helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll get you a better answer. There's Mac. Did I miss anything, Mac?
Council, good to meet you. Thanks for having me here tonight. And Chief, the only thing I would add there is that the 30-day retention policy mainly applies to any data that is captured by the cameras, but then goes unused. You know, I drive by one of the cameras on my way to work one day. You know, I'm not involved with any crimes. My vehicle doesn't look like any others that are traveling that chief or his team may be searching for. Those are the images that are automatically wiped after 30 days. If a vehicle is captured and involved in an investigation, those actually automatically integrate in with the evidence repository that the PD is already using.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Councilmember Gilman, followed by Councilmember Vanderpool.
First, Chief, with great respect and thinking about reimagining, I wanted to take exception with the notion that criminals are coming into Olympia to victimize the community. I think people commit crimes, but I've met people who've committed crimes, but I've never met a person who was born and died a criminal. So I think that's language that I would love to see evolve.
Thank you.
Yeah. My question, from my limited experience with having cars stolen, was that at least in a couple of instances, they were just used as transportation. And so I'm wondering, of the 303 cars, how many were used as an implement, and then about what share of them were involved in the crimes that you were describing?
I don't have that number. But you are right. I would hesitate to say that most of them are used for transportation. I don't think that's the case. They're last year, the year before, we saw a high number of them being stolen and then simply driven to another location to get them out of whatever area they were at, and then things inside the car were stolen. So they were like doing a vehicle prowl, but moving the car so they could be more successful in stealing stuff from inside the car. We did see that a lot, but I don't have I'm sorry, but I don't have a breakdown of how many cars were used in that. No.
Sure, and something that was helpful to me in our conversation at the Cliffs Committee was the recovery rate. I was surprised, seeing the national news stories about vehicles being harvested and loaded into containers to ship to somewhere else in the world, that we have a very high recovery rate. It doesn't mean they're all in perfect shape when you get them back, but that means it's not an organized crime, grab all of the whatever Nissan Sentras in 2 counties and ship them away.
No, that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing that organized effort to load up a certain type of car on a ship and send it somewhere. That's not the type of auto thefts we're seeing right now. It's mostly to further some activity that they're doing, whether it be a robbery or a burglary. And that's really where we're seeing most of them.
Okay. So I'm glad for this. I support this, and I look forward as we have reporting after a year to see that correlation between stolen cars identified and cars that are identified as being part of committing a crime.
Yeah.
So.
Councilmember Vanderpool.
I had the privilege of, when I was working on my undergraduate, being security at South Center Mall in Tukwila, and we would have up to a dozen stolen cars showing up at the lot at 3 a.m. And it got to the point where their police department had an automatic reporting system because they had so many break-ins, thefts. It got out of control. Much bigger population, obviously. So I get the need. I really do. I do have a question, though, and this may be for Flock to answer. So what would be the insurance against like a server break-in? Because we live in a day and age where that does happen, and that may be a public concern.
That's all you, Mac.
Yeah, happy to answer that there. With all of the data that Flock is storing, we operate in the AWS government cloud. Part of the security that we put behind that is the highest level of encryption that is available to a company like Flock, which is AES 256. So far, no data breaches, no issues as far as that goes. If you're asking for a specific dollar amount, that's something that I might have to circle back to council on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? I have one, Chief. Actually, this also might be for Flock, about the transparency portal that you mentioned, and you mentioned that there's like a Excel link, and you mentioned that it will show when data has been accessed. But I'm just curious, does it give any other information about like which camera it is in the city or anything like that at all?
Let me try this one, and then I'll turn it over to you. I asked Mac the same question because I pulled up the Excel spreadsheet, and it was a little confusing for me to look at. So he's checking with his support staff to see if we can make it a little more user-friendly. But my understanding is we should be able to customize the fields. So we can require the officer to put in, what camera he was looking at or what camera they searched, what the case number for the related investigation is, what the officer's name, and, you know, are they looking for a suspect or what the case is. Did I answer it, Mac?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head there, Chief. Part of that public search audit that's available within our transparency portal relies on the data that the actual officer is inputting in there. And so by setting up a policy, which is something that Chief and I have talked about, where every search requires a reason, attaching a case number, attaching a camera number, those types of things are editable within our transparency portal and the public search audit functions there.
Thank you. That's great to hear, and I appreciate the foresight on and trying to improve that so that the average person can interpret it for themselves. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief. So that concludes our discussion on item 6B. No action is required for that. It was just a briefing. So, or excuse me, 6A. So we will move on now to agenda item 6B, which is an overview of the community representative briefing of the December 2022 officer-involved shooting, which will be presented to us by Shelby Parker, our Deputy Chief of the Police Department, and Sarah Nagy, our community representative on the Community's Use of Force Review Board.
Thank you, Mayor Payne and City Council members. Thank you for sticking with us so late. It's gotten really late this evening. For the record, I'm Shelby Parker. I'm a Deputy Chief with the Olympia Police Department. Tonight, I will review the department's internal review process and summarize an Olympia police officer's use of force during a SWAT deployment in Tumwater on December 29th, 2022. You will also hear from the Olympia Community Representative, Sarah Nagy, who participated in the Use of Force Review Board. I want to personally thank our community representative for their tireless work on this particular investigation. There was over a terabyte worth of data and media to review, and so it took a considerable amount of time and dedication. And I really appreciate Sarah for sticking with us this evening. It's late. Here is our agenda for this evening. And moving on. On December 29th, 2022, at approximately 10:30 a.m., the Thurston County Sheriff's Office Civil Division responded to 7108 Desperado Drive in Tumwater to attempt a civil service of an eviction. The occupant of the residence did not respond to the deputy's attempt to communicate with him at the front door. After multiple attempts to communicate, the front door was forced open. Deputies found the front door heavily fortified. Deputies observed the occupant at the top of the stairs. He concealed his hands, yelled at the deputies, and refused to exit the residence. Deputies observed what appeared to be an improvised explosive device at the rear of the residence. The Thurston County Sheriff's Office Command activated the Thurston County SWAT team and requested the Washington State Patrol Bomb Squad due to the increased risk to public safety. The Thurston County SWAT team is a multi-agency team comprised of members from the Thurston County Sheriff's Office, the Olympia Police Department, the Tumwater Police Department, the Lacey Police Department, Yelm Police Department, Medic One, and Providence Health. Over 2.5 hours of crisis negotiations were conducted with the occupant while the SWAT team was responding and developing a tactical plan. The occupant's behavior was erratic, ranging from yelling in both English and his primary language to laughing out of context. At approximately 1:26 p.m., the occupant fired multiple rounds directly at SWAT members. SWAT members retreated and additional resources were deployed. Over the next 8 hours and 16 minutes, the occupant repeatedly fired at SWAT members and SWAT armored vehicles. SWAT members returned fire several times. One Olympia police officer returned fire. The Olympia officer's rounds did not strike the occupant. After several hours, the occupant surrendered, bringing an end to an 11-hour and 12-minute event. OPD will objectively evaluate the use of force by its members to ensure their authority is used lawfully, appropriately, and is consistent with the training and policy of the Olympia Police Department. Per policy, a use of force review board was convened. The board's composition is dictated by policy and is comprised of the following members: a lieutenant in the involved member's chain of command, a training sergeant, a patrol sergeant, an officer selected by the involved officer, a sworn peace officer from an outside law enforcement agency, a department instructor, and a community member. Also, a deputy chief will be the board chair. The Use of Force Review Board is responsible for reviewing the circumstances of any use of force that results in great bodily harm, death, or an officer's intentional discharge of a firearm. At the conclusion of reviewing the case information and reviewing witness and involved officers, the board will determine if the officer's actions were within department policy and training. The board may recommend changes to policy or training. At this time, I'd like to turn the podium over to Olympia Community Representative Sarah Nagy.
Thank you, and thanks so much for your time and for giving me the opportunity to speak about my work with the community board. My name is Sarah Nagy. I've lived in Olympia since 2017. I live on the east side with my wife. In my day job, I'm a legal aid attorney. I first applied for the board back in 2020. I wasn't selected, but later I was selected to fill a vacancy in 2022. And this was my first involvement with a use of force review board. I want to speak this evening briefly about what the process looked like from my perspective and offer just a couple of observations about the role of the community representative on the board. Beginning with the process. So in other circumstances, a community member would have the opportunity to be involved much sooner sometimes very soon after the incident occurred. As Deputy Chief Parker described, there were other agency reviews before this. This was sometime after the event. So I was involved only at the very end with OPD's review. Several weeks before the board convened, all the members received a file containing over a terabyte of material, body cam footage, materials from prior investigations. The preparation was very involved because of that volume of information, the number of law enforcement jurisdictions involved, and the fact it was an all-day standoff. It was almost 12 hours long, and there were probably a dozen people's body cam footage to review, and the body cameras were on that entire time. So there was also audio from the crisis negotiations that were ongoing the whole time, and as I said, materials from the prior investigations. So it was a time commitment to become fully familiar with the timeline and to understand where the use of force incident fit within that timeline. The actual use of force was just a few seconds of all of that time and took place a few hours before the end of the incident when the person in the home finally surrendered. In preparing, my goal was to understand the events that led to the moment where the officer fired his weapon. What else had been tried and failed, what he had seen, how the situation had escalated, and what position he was in when he decided to fire. I'll pause here just to emphasize that the scope of the board's inquiry was very limited. Of course, the context is really important to understanding why something happened. But for example, I came in with a question about the earlier attempts to evict this person by the sheriff's office, which had failed some months prior. But whether the incident itself could have been prevented with different actions further upstream was not part of the board's inquiry. It was limited to the officer's actions in the moment he decided to use force. And so that was where we really focused our attention. In terms of the process, over the 2 days we met, the board had the opportunity to ask questions of a wide variety of people, law enforcement who had been involved in the previous investigations, other officers involved in the incident itself, and the involved officer. The inquiry was structured so that we started kind of broader, and then were really narrowed down on what our questions for the person involved were when it was time to speak with him. Time was taken to work fully through all the questions and points of uncertainty. There was opportunity to call witnesses back if we needed to ask them further questions. And I think the two-day structure was very helpful. For example, during the first day, there were some very specific questions among the board about where at the scene bullets had been found and where they had been fired from, because gunfire had been exchanged throughout the day, and it is important in understanding how someone used their training and followed policy to know, that they followed policies related to keeping track of what was in their weapon and what was used. With the two-day structure, we were able to go back and take time at home to look over the file again and get really solid answers to those questions before coming back and discussing them again. I'll speak now about my role, as I understood it, was to ask questions that I thought others in the community would have, and especially to bring the perspective of someone who doesn't have an officer's training. I had questions that I know seemed very basic to the law enforcement officers on the board. I asked questions like, what kind of gun is that? And I hear this phrase from policy used, what does that mean to you, and do you think that's what that would mean to the involved officer? Sorry, what's that acronym? Was one I asked about 700 times. I'm a lawyer, I get it. I assumed that if I wasn't familiar with something, or if I had a question, then others in the community would probably have the same question, so better to go ahead and ask it. And I'll add that the members of the board were really generous with their time. They always took the time to explain everything and share their expertise and make sure we were all on the same page before we continued. I'll finish up with just a few final remarks. I concurred with the group that the use of force in that instance was justified under the circumstances and under policy. As Deputy Chief Parker said, there was some discussion of perhaps in the future bringing interpreters into the situation earlier when it's clear that someone has a primary language other than English, but otherwise didn't find any need to change or update policy in response to this. I found the part of the investigation I was involved with to be extremely thorough and well done. We had as much information as we could possibly need to fully understand the situation. I had every opportunity to ask questions about the process and the policy in the weeks ahead of the actual review board, and the other members of the board, as I said, were extremely generous with their time and expertise in making sure we were all working from the same information and understanding of that information. In conclusion, I would just say that as the community representative, I felt the board truly left no stone unturned, that they took this use of force incident really seriously, and that we can have full confidence in the decision. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Any questions from the dais? Councilmember Madrone, followed by Councilmember Gilman.
Yeah, Sarah, I was recalling that you've been in this council chambers before to talk to us about tenant protections. When I say us, that even predates my time on council, so full circle for you, huh?
That's right. I showed up here and I saw so many people I know, and I wasn't actually here to argue with them for once, so.
I'm going to ask the same question I asked the last community representative who wanted to come and speak about her experience. It sounds like it was a significant time commitment on your part, and you also bring a certain, expertise with your legal lens on things. But do you feel that? It sounds like the process for you was, fulfilling, and that you feel satisfied with how it went. But do you feel like it's sustainable for other folks who might find themselves in the role that you're in, and with the level of time commitment and the deep digging that happens? The answer that we were given before from the last person, just so you know, was if change comes from us doing this work, then I think it's going to be sustainable. So just to give you that, but how do you feel like this is going to go moving forward?
I think it is sustainable. I think things like this, like getting to present about what happened, are really important. I think just having it on the record, I hope that what I said would make it feel a little more accessible for someone to go and be the only non-police officer on the review board and, you know, not feel intimidated by that, because as I said, it was a good experience. I did take the survey about changes that are being proposed regarding updates to this process, and I think suggestions like expanding the board is a great idea, and expanding some of the things folks can do besides these much more time-intensive things, which also are really dependent on my being able to just take 2 days off of work. That's not something a lot of people can do. I think roles like policy review, even, you know, infrequent meetings to discuss relevant issues, I think that can be a really valuable way for people to contribute who don't necessarily have the freedom and flexibility that I have to do this work. And so I think there is a way forward that way, and that would make it more sustainable.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. Sarah, I'm just wondering about sort of the total time commitment and context as we were interviewing people last night about this same time of night to join you in the pool. So 2 days off work to initially review the documents, and you're probably a graduate of Evelyn Wood School of Speed Reading Dynamics, so extra fast. And then how much other time in terms of how much individual review time and then how much meeting time across the whole process?
Well, the 2 days was the 2 days of the actual review board.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. I
Okay.
don't think I was clear. You know, it was 2 days with agendas for witnesses, but it was basically a full workday both days with a lunch break. Again, this was also, I think, and Deputy Chief Parker can correct me, this was a little bit of, I think there's always a pretty big volume of stuff, but this was unusual again because of just the sheer number of people involved, like a full SWAT call out, dozens of people, 12 hours of body cam footage per person. That's more than is typical. Yeah, I'm hearing that that's more than is typical. So, yeah, it was, I did not take time off work for document and body cam review. I did it in the mornings before work and the evenings after work. It's another thing. I don't have kids. I don't have pets. I have a 9-to-5 that is pretty usually a 9-to-5. So that was something it was possible for me to work my schedule around as well. But yeah, we had the documents, I think, 4 to 6 weeks ahead of time, and I spent probably 2 to 3 hours a night for a couple weeks working my way through them. I didn't look at every single moment of every body cam footage because you come to understand what's more relevant to the actual incident as you work your way through the timeline, but it was still a pretty hefty time commitment.
Wow, and thank you very much. And I hope that if you draw another one, it's a very brief incident to review.
Any other questions or comments from council? All right, well, I will just add to that by saying thank you very much for your service. We currently have 3 positions that we need to fill of the 6 currently for the Community and Livability and Public Safety Committee to move forward to council to consider. And I appreciate you sort of allowing us sort of inside of what it's like, what your experience is like. I appreciate this part of the presentation. I think I mentioned in committee recently about, thinking about how are we being intentional in terms of our recruitment for community members to come forward and participate on the use of force board. And I think that this presentation should be clipped and be used as a recruiting tool. Specifically, you're part of it so that members of our community can hear what it's like to be part of it. So I appreciate your service and your sticking with us this evening.
Sure thing. I hope I didn't scare anybody away from it. It's a good experience.
Not at all. Thank you, Sarah. And I'll just add to it also by saying that it's the scenario that was reviewed by the Use of Force Board. You know, this is a classic example of why we're so thankful to our officers in uniform who are serving our city and our greater community. And so we appreciate your service to all of us to keep us safe. So thank you. All right, so that concludes all of our business items for the evening. So we will move on to council reports. And I will begin with my report, just a few brief items. Excuse me. Just a few weeks ago, on March 11th, I participated in Inside Oli, with a Meet the New Mayor session with city staff, so it was wonderful to have that opportunity to engage with some of our staff, and it was recorded, so for those who weren't able to see it, they can go back and review it at a later time, but I appreciated that opportunity to engage and just share a little bit more about myself and what it's been like for me so far. So appreciated that opportunity. In fact, I think I'd like to do that again at some point, maybe in the future, and see how things are, maybe at the 2-year mark or something like that. I also delivered remarks at the Rebuilding Together Thurston County breakfast on the importance of maintaining homes for low-income residents in need of health and safety repairs for their homes. So I appreciated the opportunity to come and be the keynote for that. I also met with the South Capitol Neighborhood Board meeting on traffic safety. I spoke a little bit about this earlier today in agenda setting in regards to their concerns around speeding and just general traffic safety on Capitol Boulevard and Capitol Way. And so I will be sharing more with members of council around that. If you're interested in hearing what I learned and what I heard from community members, I'm happy to chat with you about that. And also, I expect them to probably reach out to us in the coming weeks. Also, I had a meeting with Paul recently to receive an update on the evolution of Rebecca Howard Park, and I'm very excited about the work that is happening, and very much excited for council to hear an update on what's going on with that as well. So stay tuned. And lastly, you know, I learned that the Biden administration has submitted its fiscal year 25 budget to Congress, and in that budget, it calls for a $400 million reduction to the Community Development Block Grant, or the CDBG funds, which are funds that we receive annually from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for assisting cities with expanding economic opportunities for low-income renters and low-income residents within our community, and a myriad of other things that it does. And I have to say that I am disappointed to hear that this is actually something that was proposed in the budget, considering that the CDBG program is celebrating its 50th year anniversary this year. And so I joined the U.S. Conference of Mayors in opposing this recommendation to Congress, and I ask our members of Congress and our delegation to reject the proposal and to continue to fund the CDBG program. So with that, I will start to my left with the Mayor Pro Tem. Or I'm sorry, that was last time. I will start to my right with Councilmember Madrone. That's right, I keep track of that, believe it or not.
Do you? Is it part of your little timer up front? You get a, never. Well, and you know, as you're talking about CDBG, it makes me wonder if that's not something we should be communicating to our federal lobbyists in terms of something that we'd like to elevate as part of our federal agenda. Lot had a board meeting on the 13th, and we did look at the budget process for over that we'll be going through over the next year. And one thing that I thought was very interesting, and I think it's very relevant actually to the conversations that we're having around tenant protections actually, is the way that Lot does their budget is they anticipate, or they program in a 3% increase in rates each year. Not because they know the price is gonna go up 3%, they know sometimes inflation's gonna be higher and lower, they know sometimes there's gonna be big infrastructure investments certain years and not others, but they have a really, you know, they can forecast in the future and see that over time that it evens out, like all their needs and expenses come together. And I connect that with the what we're hearing around tenant protections and concerns from landlords that you know that they hold their rent stagnant for many years to support a tenant, which can be needed, but then they find out they're really far behind in some kind of maintenance on the house, and then there's a sudden need for an infusion of cash, and then rents go up a lot. And so when we're talking about stabilizing you know, rental costs, I just see some correlation there, and that it actually could provide a lot more stability for tenants if there is that programmed increase each year rather than a large spike needed at one time that could, you know, cause a tenant to have to leave. Anyways, it's kind of a tangent of Lot, but we went through our budget process for the next year, and we also learned, were briefed on their pre-treatment programs. I won't go into the details there, but there are certain kinds of businesses that have to pre-treat water before it goes into the system: food service, dental offices, breweries, car washes, dry cleaners, and then some larger corporations, Crown, Pepsi, et cetera, that actually need very specific permits. We saw really gross pictures of, you know, fats, oils, and grease in, you know, systems that needed maintenance. That's all I'll say about that. And then yesterday, the Deschutes Estuary Funding and Governance Work Group met. Jim was unable to be there, so I was there as the alternate. So the focus of the work this year is going from a memorandum of understanding to an ILA, an interlocal agreement that all of the jurisdictions vote on. And it has a lot to do with not just the restoration of the Deschutes Estuary, but the future sediment needs around sediment. And so we all saw, you know, which jurisdictions paying what percentage over time. And so it's codifying a memorandum of understanding into an interlocal agreement. And so there's a timeline to get that done this year. You know, they were hoping to be able to bring a draft ILA to us in October or November. And Jay and I both were like, well, could we get it a little bit sooner? Because we're going to be in our budget process and we have a lot of comp plan stuff to do at the end of the year. So we're hoping to be able to have that in front of council in September for your review. You know, it was cool to get an update on, you know, how things are going along with the Deschutes Estuary. They're planning on a mile of boardwalk for people to be able to experience the estuary in the middle and south basins, which is really cool. Yeah, so stay tuned for more on that. And I'll also just note real quick that when I spoke, when I did reports last time, I mentioned conversation at TRPC around the countywide planning policies needing to change for us to align with the goals of Sustainable Thurston. And I've since heard from Ty Menser that the county commissioners have talked about that, and they are going to propose to the jurisdictions that we open the countywide planning policies to be able to have that conversation. And so I hope that we, as one of those jurisdictions that has to support opening that process up, I hope that we support that, so so that we can talk about you know, sustainable development for Thurston County. That's all.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Madrone? Councilmember Vanderpool.
The Transportation Policy Board met this last week. We did a approval funding amendment for a chip seal, and usually that's just automatic business, but after looking a little, there is a possibility, a proof of concept to include a bicycle upgrade lane on that segment of street. That's between, that's on Pacific headed west from State to Fur Street. So it's proof of concept, but I think that it's a good point that every time we do work on projects, considering doing improvements along the way. We also got an update on a non-driver population analysis. This analysis was a statewide analysis. It did not allow us to zoom into Thurston County or Olympia in particular. However, it did give us some data about why people don't drive. And the biggest three factors were, costs. That goes from the high cost of owning cars or the perceived cost of owning cars to the disabilities and expensive equipment, incomes, finding ownership, to limited flexibility, and some of it is lifestyle. And it seems like the trend seems like in the data is that the more urban you get, and some of us this seems obvious, but the more urban you get, the more equitable it becomes when it comes to public transportation and people using access. And that in the more rural areas, people have to rely on community, and if they're not in community, they participate less in community. And so there is this kind of trend in certain areas around the state. Let's see. On Friday, I was at altitude 15. You were there too.
Yep.
And it was pretty nice to go look at this. It's right across from Intercity Transit Hub downtown. It was nice to see, like, this is going to be a multitude of potential restaurants inside this food hall and a food co-op, culinary co-op. And, it's great to see spaces being used in the downtown and advancing that. People seemed very optimistic about the city. It was also the first day of sun, so it could have just been like the effect of like, oh, the sun's come out for the first time in 3 months. And then I did a tour of the Senior Village Cooperative on Sunday. I have made contact with the president because they're self-governed, and I'm trying to see if I can get some information about how they went about developing a cooperative senior housing, because they are self-governed, and in that way, not all of them are that way. Most of the time, it's ran by a big company, and so I'm in communication with them. They also, when I was there, told me that they had issues with the street and accidents and safety, and so I've already communicated a little bit of that out to staff. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Vanderpool? Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Payne. The TCOM 911 board met, but it was a brief meeting, and the main thing we did was to re-elect Lenny Greenstein from Lacey as the chair and Liata Dalhoff from Tumwater as the vice chair. So I'll keep you posted as we have more meaty meetings. Last Wednesday, I attended, along with several other folks from the city, a chamber forum on mental health and substance use disorder resources and presentations. And the main takeaway I wanted to offer was that there were 13 different organizations providing some sort of service. It was dramatically different from a few years ago. There actually are inpatient beds. There's multiple opportunities for opioid treatment within our area. So I think it's hard for us because we don't, as a city, we don't touch that part of the public health work directly, but to keep track of all that fast evolution. But I was excited to see that evolving. And then I just have one thing I wanted to elevate that we might consider learning about or getting more information from staff. And that's a trail user pointed out a video that was on Facebook that was a high-speed pursuit down the Chehalis Western Trail. Went through the Olympia part of the trail at about 50 miles an hour, and then used 3 law enforcement vehicles as weapons to stop the person they were chasing. And the whole question of what are the rules around, do we have any reach if the county or state patrol decide to roll its speed down the Chehalis Western or the Karen Fraser Trail, which we intended for cyclists and pedestrian, or walkers and cyclists, At any rate, I know that we have policies internally for our department, but I also understand those policies don't apply to our geography, just to the police department that we supervise. But one specific question I have is whether a pit maneuver is considered a critical incident use of force. and whether there'll be investigation. But it was a concerned trail user that pointed it out to me, and I can't imagine walking my dog and having a parade of 50-mile-an-hour vehicles cruising by on the trail. So.
Very interesting inquiry. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Any questions or comments for Councilmember Gilman? Councilmember Madrone.
I just wanted to make sure you knew, as our intercity transit rep, that there's a new Instagram account at Bus 41 Evergreen, and it is all about showing love for the Bus 41, and they ask people to submit photos of sightings and photos from on the bus for them to post and share the love.
That is lovely. And the next time you and I take a walk, you can show me how to use Instagram. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just a bunch of postcard pictures.
It's great.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen.
I'm gonna just roll through these. I know it's late. So March 7th, really pleased to speak at the City of Olympia's Women's Employee Resource Group kickoff. I love that is something that the city is supporting, and I'm low-key a little envious that I'm not a sort of a regular employee and signing up to be a part of the craft group. There's different interest groups within this Women's Employee Resource Group, and I haven't. I'm kind of in the business in my day job of. A lot of DEI things, but one of them being employee resource groups, and I haven't seen it sort of take off in this way where it's so driven on employees' interests and passion. So I thought that was really neat. I mean, there's everything from podcast and book club to parenting club to let's talk about our bodies to crafts and neurodivergence. I was like, wow, well, all right. Very, very neat. And it was lovely we met in these chambers, and it was lovely to have I think there was this real moment where we all kind of broke for a moment of our, professional masks, and just we're able to be vulnerable with each other and acknowledge, the heaviness that we carry sometimes. So March 11th, I listened in at Firehouse 1 to the Social Justice and Equity Commission's subcommittee of committee members, and they interacted with the police auditor in person, and also Chief Allen was there to give a presentation as well. And I was really excited from that meeting. So that meeting was really to discuss the auditor's draft report, kind of talking about what a community oversight or community involvement in law enforcement would look like, and my hope was just to hear subcommittee members from the Social Justice and Equity Commission that really dug in, and I felt like that's what we heard, and we got a lot of sort of big philosophical things to, hey, we want to see a policy. We're dug in, and to which I think made some folks sweat a little bit, because that's not an easy thing to turn around. But really looking forward to when that comes before council. We, in agenda setting today, we had discussed moving it from our April 16th meeting into early May. To give staff a little bit more time, and for myself as the liaison to the police auditor, be able to attend in person. But really looking forward to when everyone else can hear about that work. March 13th, many council members and staff members attended the Distinguished Leaders Award and heard from former Mayor Doug Ma, who was being recognized that night. And I just really like that man. He is very interesting to me. There's a certain style, and he's just been a part of so much. And I doubt we agree on everything, him and I. And he is really shows diplomacy, and just like getting up and doing a thing again over and over and over again. And a lot of things that I really admire. So I was glad that the city sponsored a table and were there to support. I think that's really great. March 17th, also joined council members in being in community. I think that's what I'd call it, being in community with Olympia School District parents. They were celebrating, I think, a recent win for them. And it was really, I think, inspiring to see folks come together. And it wasn't just really a celebration, but it was a bit of rallying and sharing some of their efforts to pose what Councilmember Madron, you're saying, bring me solutions. And when I was going around and chatting with the different parents, they're working on hopefully some solutions. And yeah, that was just really beautiful to be a part of. And then March 18th, that was yesterday. Thank you so much to staff and to CLIPS committee members for hanging on and doing so many interviews to right about this time. And with that, I will close.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mayor Pro Tem Nguyen? All right, seeing none. Wow, we've been busy. We haven't said nothing to report in weeks. City Manager Bernie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple items, a couple follow-ups. I took the note on the Facebook video. I'm sure the chief and the deputy chief took the same note, and we'll look into that a little bit further and get you an update on kind of what happened with that event and kind of what we know about it. So we'll follow up with the full council on that. And then I want to thank the Mayor Pro Tem for being there at the kickoff for one of our employee resource groups. And I just want to highlight that it's the first of a few employee resource groups that are kicking off around different topics and different groups in our community, in our city community, and our employee groups. So I look forward to sharing more with council in the future about that work and kind of how it's kicking off. And so I'll perhaps maybe we'll spend some time coming to council with an update on more of that work. And then last thing for me is I had an opportunity last week, as you know, to attend the National League of Cities Conference in Washington, D.C. And what an amazing opportunity to network through some roundtable workshops with elected and appointed officials from all across the country around topics of housing and economic development and public safety. All the things that we're talking about here, they're talking about all across the country at the city level. I had an opportunity to hand out a lot of my cards because one of the things that was really proud is we're doing really great work here in Olympia. And I can't tell you how many times I heard, for a city your size, I can't believe the amount of work that you guys are doing and the topics you're taking on. So it's just really great to hear and just encourage council members. That conference occurs every March in Washington, D.C. If it's something you're interested in, I'd be happy to talk with you more about it. Had a chance to hear from President Biden on day one directly, speaking to the NLC group. And then also while I was back there, I had a chance to meet with Senator Murray, Senator Cantwell, and Congresswoman Strickland during my time. So a very jam-packed week, but grateful for the opportunity to be there and to represent the city of Olympia. That's my report.
Thanks, Jay. Any questions or comments for the city manager? All right. Seeing none at this time, we will recess the meeting for up to 4 or 5 minutes. And at that time, it will be followed by an executive session for up to 45 minutes. In room 112, pursuant to a personnel matter, no decisions will be made. At the conclusion of the executive session, we will be adjourned for the evening.